Although the pre-battle rule was that one had to kill 5 wolves or more to be considered meritorious, in reality only a little over 70 gray wolves were killed. With many people and few wolves, there weren't enough to go around. You seized this opportunity to fully promote the longbow. Equipping the tribespeople with the new standard longbow, the bow was made from hard and highly flexible mulberry wood, paired with incredibly strong and super durable sisal fiber bowstrings. The total length was 1.75 meters, suited to the height and strength of most tribespeople. Its power was not to be underestimated. The tribe had readily available timber and a complete set of woodworking tools. Initially, mass production seemed easy, but in practice they encountered numerous difficulties. The first challenge was selecting the wood. The requirements for bow wood were strict. It had to be straight, with a ratio of sapwood to heartwood of 1 to 2 for optimal performance. Wood with too much sapwood lacked toughness, making the bow prone to damage and short-lived. But the tribe currently had only one. The heavy logging saw requiring 2 people to pull, it simply couldn't handle delicate work. The small hand saw was fine for trimming branches, but sawing logs was a struggle. After much contemplation, you finally recalled a tool from childhood, the frame saw, expert at cutting planks and strips with its tension blade. With a plan in mind, you quickly assigned tasks. Lame one would forge a blade with holes at both ends and make a wooden frame. Both experienced, crafting this small tool was no challenge. You, meanwhile, tackled another problem: how to draw straight lines on logs. The first idea that came to mind was the ink line, an ancient wisdom where 2 points define a line. Though the tribe had hemp twine, ink was nowhere to be found. With no papermaking in the tribe yet, ink wasn't needed for daily writing or teaching. But now it was urgently required. Racking your brains, you recalled ancient ink-making methods. Pine soot ink used residual soot from incompletely burned, oily pine wood. While there was no need for a full-scale setup with kilns and flues, a simple brick stove would suffice. You hastily built one, lit pine branches, and thick black smoke billowed. Soon, the bricks were coated in soot. Carefully scraping off the black powder, you mixed it with water into a thick ink. Mission accomplished. Next, you soaked the hemp twine, pulled it out once saturated, and a makeshift ink line was ready. Though lacking an ink pot, using it directly would do. You and Mutun worked with hands blackened, focused on marking lines, when Scholar and Wooden Bucket rushed over excitedly, holding the newly made frame saw, eagerly awaiting your approval. Grabbing a handful of snow to clean your hands, you took the nearly 70-centimeter long saw. The bronze blade was securely mounted on the bow-shaped frame with copper nails. Pulling the hemp cord taut, the blade straightened and aligned with the ink line on the log. A gentle pull sent ink dust flying, the line instantly swallowed by a fine groove, cutting smoothly along the log's length. The test proved remarkably effective. You immediately ordered 20 more made. Enough red materials? Lame one counted on his fingers, then nodded, assuring there was enough bronze for the blades. With a wave, you said, "Go ahead, don't spare materials." The tribe's development needs bronze tools everywhere. Weapons, daily items, we're increasingly reliant. We don't even have a bronze pot yet. Come spring, plowing and salt collection are urgent, and the bronze mine must be reopened. Thinking of mining sparked another idea, a boat specifically for the tribe. Mining required traveling upstream along the river to the site, a half-day's walk. Using pack animals was inefficient and exhausting, plus, some areas were impassable, slowing progress significantly. If boats were loaded at the original tree tribe's location, they could float downstream in about an hour, carrying large loads. This boat would have a slightly upturned, square flat bottom, designed for inland navigation. With varying river depths, the flat-bottomed boat had shallow draft, staying afloat steadily even in shallow areas, eliminating the risk of grounding. Top-notch in safety and accessibility. Considering the river's width, you set the boat's dimensions: 3 meters wide, 8 meters long, a ratio ensuring speed, stability, and durability, easy for novice tribesmen to handle. The hull would be reinforced with 2 keels and 7 U-shaped ribs, made from keel pine wood, ensuring sturdiness and longevity. Planks would use desert star timber, with the outer layer repurposed for long-term use, maximizing resource efficiency. Oars wouldn't need separate making. Existing bronze shovels could serve multiple roles, as paddles, weapons, and tools. Everyone watched you tinker with new creations daily, filled with curiosity. Only the original tree tribe members had an inkling, having seen your simple wooden raft made from branches before, the principle similar to the flat-bottomed boat, just upgraded with wooden keels and planks. That evening, You were directing your clansmen in a flurry of work when Fidor, the lookout, shouted at the top of his lungs. About 20 people are coming from the small river to the east. They look like they're from the Black Rat tribe, heading straight for us. Your heart skipped a beat with a mix of suspicion. Quickly, you climbed onto the wall to get a better view. There was Rat Leader hurrying toward you with 10 adults and 10 boys. You wondered to yourself, the Black Rat tribe only had about 150 people. Where did so many nearly grown boys come from? The clansmen who had been traded from the Black Rat tribe earlier, hearing the shouts, thought another exchange was happening. Filled with anticipation, they rushed out, hoping to see if any of their own kin were among the newcomers. As for the young boys from the Li tribe following behind Rat Leader, their minds were filled with questions. All they knew was that their chieftain had traded them for 5 trial discs. Though they didn't fully understand the reasoning, they held little resentment and obediently followed the group. When Rat Leader reached the entrance, he looked up at the newly heightened wall, then peered inside the enclosure. His eyes fell upon nearly 100 livestock, stacks of densely packed dried cured meat, and more beyond. Buying a hide, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. If it weren't for the golden crown on your head, he'd have thought he'd come to the wrong place. He swallowed hard. Is this the Han tribe? The scholar stammered. I am Shuda. I've come to trade for naughty ones. You glanced at Shuda and his group outside the gate but didn't bother questioning further. Following the usual protocol, you had them surrender their weapons before allowing them inside the walls. Shuda pointed to the boys and said, Chief of the Han tribe, I've come to trade for naughty ones. These are the people I've brought. This time, I'll only exchange them for pottery. While arranging for someone to fetch the pottery, you studied Shuda with suspicion. Though you couldn't understand his words, he acted guilty, pretending not to know what was going on and just looking around nervously. Truth be told, you were more than happy for him to bring more people. Once the children grew up, they could work. Trading them for pottery was a great deal. Xianxia and Shurtu quickly brought 5 pottery pots. The trade was straightforward. 10 boys for 5 pottery pots. As dusk approached and wolves began prowling outside, you offered Shuda and his group a place to stay for the night. Pulling him into the cave, you called out to everyone to prepare a stew and treat the guests well. The 10 youths from the Li tribe were traded off in a daze. Seeing the Han tribe's strength and prosperity, with large herds of livestock, endless meat, and wild oxen, giant elk, and Kongshao, a type of deer, taller than humans. They were both shocked and thrilled, hoping to settle here for good. You instructed the elders to assign them tasks like cleaning, teaching them to recognize characters and exchange hides, and arranging their accommodations. Their first priority was to learn the Han language, Han characters, and familiarize themselves with the tribe. Finally, you told them to eat their fill, assuring them the tribe had plenty of food. The youths felt incredibly fortunate. In the Li tribe, they often went hungry, and children had to fight for food, with the weaker ones starving. Here, all the food was unlimited. Fragrant meat broth and large chunks of stewed meat. They ate bowl after bowl until they were so full their eyes rolled back. You couldn't stand to watch any longer and quickly stepped in to stop them, thinking, don't let them die of overeating right after we traded for them. Although the Han tribe had plenty of food, it couldn't be wasted. There would be plenty to eat in the future. After the meal, the night was crowded and bustling. The night watchman stayed in the blue brick sheds inside the walls, and Shuda's group was also accommodated there. Shuda couldn't sleep and joined you on the wall for guard duty. Filled with doubt, he stared at the wolf hides inside the walls, silently comparing them to his own tribe and realizing the vast gap. The Han tribe could kill so many gray wolves. Their combat strength was truly beyond what his tribe could match. His tribe had to work tirelessly in trades just to gain a few people, while the Han tribe simply received them while staying home, and even the youngsters got to eat hot meat broth. The more he thought about it, the more he sighed, and eventually he went back to sleep. During the latter half of the night, it was time to change shifts. Deshu and Xianxia got up, and you asked them about the wolf pack. Deshu said, the night before last, there were still large packs of wolves active at the forest's edge. I saw many pairs of green eyes. Xianxia added, last night, there were far fewer. I only saw about a dozen or so. You nodded with a smile. I kept watch for half the night and didn't see any wolves out and about. The forest edge was unusually quiet. It seems the wolf pack has fallen for our trap. When day breaks, we'll go out and check. We might even harvest a good number of wolf hides and wolf meat. The next morning, after seeing off Shuda and his group, you gathered 30 adults. After an early breakfast, you headed toward the western forest. Robao and Huishan followed along. The two large creatures, having not been out for a long time, were exuberant, wagging their tails and sniffing and exploring all the way. With a wave of your hand, the tribesmen, all holding spears, followed you silently and resolutely into the forest. The journey was eerily quiet, with only the sound of their shoes crunching in the snow. Mountain and Meat Bun always followed along, learning as they went. You observed the ground. Before long, under a tree, you discovered the remains of two gray wolves. Their heads were covered in wounds, the flesh on their bodies had been gnawed away, and their fur was torn to shreds. It looked like internal conflict within the pack or starvation-driven cannibalism. After walking for another 3 hours, you reached the mountain where nettles were gathered. The gray wolf footprints on the ground became increasingly chaotic. Their final direction actually pointed toward the mountain peak of the former Bald tribe. You speculated to yourself, could they have gone into that cave of the Bald tribe? Wolves are known for seizing others' dens. The only place nearby that could accommodate so many gray wolves was likely that cave. As expected, upon climbing the peak, you indeed found several frozen wolf corpses. Their bellies were swollen, with large stains of blood around their mouths and hindquarters. Clearly, they had struggled in agony before death. You ordered the bodies to be gathered and marked. The team continued westward. Along the way, wolf corpses could be seen from time to time. By nearly noon, you arrived within a kilometer of the cave. At this point, the gray wolf footprints on the ground were extremely dense. The pack was most likely hiding nearby. You cautiously led the team to surround the area. Strangely, the surroundings were eerily quiet. Dali, the strong young man behind you, muttered, "Maybe they're all dead." You urgently warned in a low voice to stay alert and not let their guard down. Wolves are cunning creatures. A few minutes later, everyone reached the cave entrance. Finally, the situation inside became clear. Most of the gray wolves in the cave had already collapsed and died. Those still alive were barely hanging on, emitting low, weak growls but lacking the strength to move. Seeing this, you immediately ordered, "Everyone, pair up and go finish them off." The tribespeople, upon receiving the order, quickly formed teams to collect the spoils. Wolf meat was edible, and the tribe never wasted food, so they happily gathered all of it. Meanwhile, you took the 3 men from the former Bald tribe and headed straight toward the inner underground opening of the cave, thinking to yourself, could the idle stones be down here? At this moment, you led the tribespeople back to the Bald tribe's cave. Hurrying to the opening where the idle stones were taken, you found it blocked by a large rock. The texture and color of the rock blended almost seamlessly with the surrounding cave walls, which was why it had gone unnoticed during your last visit. Immediately, you called over a few tribespeople to move the rock. They swiftly set to work lifting the millstone-sized stone. A grating, scraping sound echoed as the ground slowly revealed a small, slanted downward opening. It was flat and round in shape, so small that only a child under 5 could barely squeeze through. Frowning, you pondered the situation. You lay on the ground, holding a torch, and leaned in to examine the opening closely. This is a mix of quartz and granite, you thought. Enlarging this opening won't be easy. Just as you were muttering to yourself, a dazzling shimmer suddenly flashed across the cave ceiling, instantly capturing your attention. The ceiling was covered with inverted cone-shaped stones, yellowish-white in color, glittering and shimmering. You immediately drew a feathered arrow, intending to shoot down some of the stone cones for a closer look. But after 2 attempts, nothing happened. You had no choice but to turn and shout, "Dali, go get a rock and knock that thing down." Hearing this, Dali eagerly grabbed a large stone and rushed over. Taking aim at the ceiling, he hurled it with a whoosh. A dull thud echoed, and the stone cone snapped off, falling to the ground and shattering into pieces. Thinking it might be salt, you bent down, picked up a small fragment, and tasted it. The next second, you spat it out repeatedly. It wasn't salt at all, it was natural soda ash. After realizing it wasn't salt, you felt somewhat disappointed. Turning to the 3 men from the former Bald tribe, you began to inquire. How do you usually know if there's something unusual down here? It's all gathered randomly. The 3 of you look at each other. After a moment of hesitation, someone finally speaks up. Once, a child accidentally fell into an animal den. When we pulled him out with a rope, we saw he was carrying this thing. Since then, we've gathered once a year before the water in the cave freezes, and again after it thaws. Hearing this, you silently ponder. We must find a way to widen the cave entrance, to mine the eye or in large quantities. Just then, A shepherd boy comes running in a panic. The gray wolves have all been dealt with, 78 in total. But there are still 8 live wolf pups. What should we do with them? Hearing there are wolf pups, your eyes instantly light up. Without a word, you head over to see for yourself. When you arrive, you see the pitiful wolf pups huddled together, whimpering hungrily in the embrace of their dead mother. Your heart fills with pity, and you order your clansmen to take the pups back and raise them carefully. But then a thought strikes you. Something doesn't feel right. There were at least 100 wolves earlier, but only 78 are accounted for. Where did the rest go? Just as you're puzzling over this, a mournful beastly roar echoes from the west. The sound sends chills down your spine. Instantly alert, you wave your hand, signaling your clansmen to guard the cave entrance. You grab your bow and spear and head toward the source of the sound. Sprinting about a kilometer to the sunny slope, the scene before you makes your blood run cold. 27 gray wolves are encircling a massive thunder beast. The beast resembles a prehistoric rhinoceros, covered in armor-like thick skin, weighing several tons. It's already covered in wounds from the wolves' attacks, with blood gushing from its vulnerable spots like the abdomen. Its ash-gray eyes lock onto you, suddenly gleaming with a pleading light, as if begging you to save it. Among the wolves, 2 immediately dart toward you, baring their teeth as if warning you to stay out of it. But you pay no heed. Raising your bow, you release 2 arrows in quick succession. The 2 wolves convulse and collapse to the ground, motionless in moments. The remaining wolves bristle with rage. With a unified howl, they surge toward you like a tidal wave. Your heart skips a beat. You hurl your bow at one charging wolf, then roll deftly to the side, snatching up a golden spear from the ground. With the spear in hand, you feel more secure. After all, you have martial arts training from your past life. The golden spear whirls fiercely in your grip as you fight your way toward the thunder beast. Though severely wounded, the beast understands gratitude. It shifts its massive body, using its back to shield you from a sneak attack. After a fierce battle, you're left with several gashes, blood trickling down, but thankfully only minor injuries. The wolf pack is now reduced to just 6, the survivors terrified and attempting to flee. But you're consumed by battle rage and won't let them escape. With one hand, you thrust the golden spear forcefully. Thud! It impales a gray wolf, pinning it firmly to the snowy ground. You retrieve your bow from the ground and release 2 more arrows, striking down 2 stragglers. Just as you're about to give chase, the thunder beast behind you lets out a weak roar, as if calling you back. You turn quickly to look. The beast struggles to stand on its bloodied limbs, yet miraculously, its belly remains unscathed. Then, with a final, mighty effort, it lifts its head and lets out a thunderous roar. The next moment, it collapses with a heavy thud. His bulging belly had deflated. Looking down, wow, a baby thunder beast was born. Ignoring her own severe injuries, the mother beast gazed with tender affection, extending her tongue to gently lick away the amniotic sac from her newborn, cleaning the little one until it was spotless. After finishing, she lifted her head, her eyes filled with bloody tears. Using the large foot at the front of her snout, she gently nudged the baby toward you, then bent her front leg and knelt before you. The meaning couldn't be clearer. She knew her time was short and wanted you to care for her little one in the future. Your eyes grew hot, tears welling up as you reassured her. Don't worry, I'll raise it well. With that, you took off your tattered animal hide robe and carefully wrapped the baby thunder beast inside. Then, dragging your weary and injured body, you staggered toward the direction of the cave. Not far along, you heard the sound of the mother beast collapsing behind you. She had closed her eyes forever. When you returned to the cave, the tribespeople stood at the entrance, holding spears with wary expressions. Seeing you covered in wounds, they crowded around, chattering with concern. Weakly, you waved a hand. Just ran into the remaining pack of gray wolves. Fought them off, but a few got away. You pointed to the little thunder beast in your arms. Take good care of this little one. From now on, our tribe will raise it. Just then, Stone came jogging over, pointing at 3 gray wolves not far away. Those wolves didn't get far. We took them down as soon as they tried to flee. You finally let out a long sigh of relief, thinking to yourself, at last, the wolf pack is completely wiped out. From now on, our people won't have to live in constant fear. After resting a while, you recounted the events with Mud and the gray wolves, sharing the whole story of the thunder beast. The women listened, their eyes reddening as they wiped away tears. Though the men showed little expression on their faces, their hearts were filled with mixed emotions. Right then, you decided to bury the mother thunder beast on the hillside. From that day on, the place would be called Entrusting Ridge. The women nodded in agreement upon hearing this. What followed was much simpler. You had roughly located the mineral deposit and gathered a small bag of natural soda crystals. Then, directing everyone, you sealed the cave entrance tightly with stones to prevent any foolish beasts from taking it over again. Next, you led 10 people to Entrusting Ridge to haul back the wolf carcasses. Along the way, you gathered branches and rocks to hastily cover the mother thunderbeast's body, planning to return the next day with copper shovels to dig a proper grave. Once everyone regrouped at the cave entrance, you cut some branches to make 2 simple stretchers. With great effort, you managed to drag back over 100 gray wolves. From then on, the story of the thunderbeast's entrustment spread throughout the tribe. The women told the tale to the children, who gathered around to see the little thunder beast, their eyes full of compassion. Most herbivores are resilient. Their young can stand and seek their mother's milk shortly after birth, and within a month they start nibbling on grass. Rhinos are much the same, but this little thunder beast was born nearly a month premature. Even half a day after birth, its eyes hadn't yet opened. That night, the weather turned bitterly cold. The little thunder beast and 8 wolf pups were brought into the cave. You even fetched 2 lactating cows, hoping they'd nurse the young ones. But neither side cooperated. The wolf pups were too small to reach the teats, and the little thunder beast did nothing but sleep. The cows weren't willing to nurse them either. Gritting your teeth, you called over a dozen men to help, forcibly milking the cows. The cows cried out in pain within the enclosure, howling half the night. Thankfully, all that effort wasn't in vain. The little ones drank the fresh milk and managed to survive, especially the little thunder beast. You had to pry its mouth open and slowly pour milk into it. After drinking the milk, the little thunder beast went from sleeping quietly to snoring loudly. This fascinated Chu Bing so much that he ended up sleeping with it that very night. The next day, as planned, you took 20 people to Tugu Ridge and dug a large pit, burying the mother thunder beast inside. You even piled stones over the grave, and from then on, this spot became a landmark of Tugu Ridge. For the remaining month of winter, life in the tribe was uneventful, but everyone was busy with their respective tasks. A week passed, and the wolf pups gradually opened their eyes. 2 weeks later, the 8 wolf pups were able to eat meat broth and rodent droppings, wandering around the open space outside the cave like newborn puppies. The faint red hue on the little thunder beast slowly faded, turning into a pure milky white. A small bump appeared where its horn was supposed to grow, and it could now stand on its own, staggering around to find a cow to nurse from. The cow was reluctant at first, but remembering the ordeal with Jinai, it had no choice but to obediently serve as the little thunder beast's wet nurse. By the 3rd week, the tribe was bustling with activity. Zhu Bing led the little thunder beast, shouting at the top of his lungs inside the enclosure, "Run, run! Hurry up and chase those dogs!" Watching from the side, you couldn't help but comment, "The name Run Run doesn't sound very nice." Hearing this, Chu Bing quickly stopped the little thunder beast and asked, "Then what should we call it?" After a moment's thought, you said, "Let's call it Benbin from now on. It means running very fast. Sounds much better than Run Run." Delighted, Chu Bing turned to the bewildered little thunder beast and shouted, "Benbin, go catch up with those dogs." By the 4th week, the carpentry team had achieved a major success. 70 standardized longbows were completed. Each bow had been personally calibrated and tested by the manager, and their quality was impeccable. In fact, thanks to the new tools, these bows were even better than the one you used yourself. The women weren't idle either, busily making fletched arrows. However, only the arrow shafts with blunt tips were finished for now, and the fletchings had been pre-attached. You planned to forge bronze arrowheads after the next mining expedition. For the time being, the tribespeople were still using the 200-plus arrows from your previous stockpile for training. One morning that week, all the adults in the tribe gathered together, each holding a longbow and forming 3 rows for archery practice. Standing at the front, you shouted, "First row, target." The hay bales 100 meters away. In an instant, arrows whistled through the air. But this first training session was a bit chaotic. Some arrows hit the hay, others flew off into the sky and disappeared, and a few didn't even launch, dropping right at the shooter's feet. You couldn't help but laugh and sigh, correcting each person one by one. As winter was nearing its end, Ratda came to the tribe for another trade. This time he brought 3 women and 6 boys, all from the Li tribe. The boys who had been traded earlier were both shocked and delighted to see their tribe's people. But you knew all too well that such trades wouldn't last much longer. Slaves weren't consumables, there would eventually be enough. It seemed that if the tribe wanted to continue growing, other methods would be needed. In the following days, the shipbuilding project also reached its final stages. Seeing the massive wooden boat completed, the tribespeople were overjoyed. Though they hadn't yet seen it in the water, everyone had taken part in its construction, and their hearts swelled with pride. At that moment, Dali, straining with all his might, tried to lift the boat's bow, but the wooden vessel didn't budge an inch. Scratching his head in confusion, he asked, "This wooden boat is so huge. How are we supposed to get it to the river?" You smiled faintly at him, pointing to the man-made canal not far away, and said, "We'll just move the boat directly over there." Dali's eyes widened in disbelief. "But there's no water there. How will that work?" You kept him in suspense, calmly waving to the others and saying, "Grab your shovels. Push a few more carts and wicker baskets to follow me. Now that winter is nearly over, the weather is growing warmer day by day, making it the perfect time for the water channel project." You lead about 30 people, marching in a grand procession with tools in hand, heading toward the artificial river and the canal. The commotion is far from small. Tribe members who haven't ventured beyond the walls in a long time are drawn over, gathering as if to watch a grand performance. A group of children, especially excited, chase after 8 wolf pups that have just reached 1 month old, laughing and running at the very front. Huizubing isn't idle either. He goes to fetch Benben, who has just finished nursing and is feeling lazy. Robao and Huishan have long since disappeared from sight. Only their distant calls can be faintly heard. It seems these two are also taking advantage of the early spring to frolic freely. Arriving at the end of the artificial river, only a 2-meter-wide strip of land between the artificial river and the stream remains unexcavated. Once this small section is breached, water will flow through. Without delay, everyone divides tasks clearly. A few jump into the trench, stirring up clouds of dust. A few on the surface are responsible for filling the wicker baskets with soil, and the rest transport the filled baskets away. The work proceeds with fiery enthusiasm. By late morning, only a thin layer of about 30 centimeters of soil remains. At that moment, water begins seeping up from the trench bottom. You quickly call for everyone in the trench to climb out. Once all are safely ashore, you swiftly tie a sturdy rope around your waist, instructing the tribespeople to hold it tight. Shovel in hand, you descend back into the trench. To avoid danger in these final moments, you decide to handle this part yourself. Gripping the shovel firmly, you strike again and again with force. After more than a dozen vigorous strikes, the seepage intensifies. The next moment, a powerful jet of water bursts through the gap, catapulting you backward. Seeing this, the tribespeople shout in unison, pulling with all their might to haul you up. In the blink of an eye, you're back on solid ground. Meanwhile, the gushing water grows increasingly fierce, soon widening the gap into a meter-wide hole. Everyone stares in awe, standing on the bank, eyes fixed on the surging river. The water swirls in turbulent eddies, carrying along many small fish swept up by the current. The wolf pups, never having witnessed such a scene, yelp in fright, scattering in all directions. Huizubing and Benben are also badly startled, dashing behind you to hide. Before long, the flow gradually stabilizes. The stream and the water channel are now successfully connected. The sharp-eyed women have already brought out wicker baskets, waiting nearby, and begin joyfully scooping up fish. The tribespeople who were just worrying about building a wooden boat now stare wide-eyed, faces full of astonishment and delight. You smile and say to everyone, "How about that? Now the water is right at your doorstep. No more long trips to fetch water in the future." The crowd exclaims in amazement, only now fully grasping the plan. At first, when you halted other work to stockpile grain, then redirected everyone to dig the river and make bricks, many were puzzled. Later, when the artificial river unexpectedly trapped wild beasts, some guessed it was a trap. Only now, seeing the channel filled with flowing water, do they truly understand the real purpose of the canal. But this is only the first step. Digging irrigation ditches along both banks of the water channel, cultivating the land, and planting crops, ensuring the tribe's food and clothing security. That is your ultimate goal. Without delay, spring has arrived, and the farming plan cannot wait. Now that the water channel is successfully flowing and spring is fully here, you realize that spring plowing brooks no delay. At noon, the tribe is bustling with excitement. Everyone gathers for a feast to celebrate the completion of the water channel. After eating and drinking their fill, you take a bundle of thin ropes and lead the tribespeople to the planned open area to begin laying out the rice paddies. Growing rice is a skilled task. The fields must remain submerged in water for long periods, so proper irrigation is essential. It also requires careful planning to maximize land use. This raises a crucial question. How much rice should our tribe plant? How large an area of farmland should we mark out? The wild rice grains are quite sizable, nearly twice as large as the common rice grains from your previous life. In a previous life, 1 gene of rice was roughly 26,000 grains. He estimated that 1 gene would yield about 12,000 grains. Considering the limited seeds, you couldn't help but mutter to yourself. In your previous life, you had only grown vegetables for a few days and knew nothing about cultivating rice. You didn't dare to sow all the seeds at once. What if nothing sprouted? That would be a disaster. After much deliberation, you gritted your teeth and decided to use only 1 lobe of rice seeds, roughly 264,000 grains. But how much rice could 1 mu of land yield? Based on the size of the wild rice in the marshlands at the time, a quick calculation led you to decide on planting 64 mu. Though not exactly boundless, this area was still substantial. If the plot was 400 meters long, it would need to be about 107 meters wide, almost the size of 6 soccer fields. Once the plan was set, the farmland was laid out neatly along the southern bank of the drinking water river. The end of the plot near the wall was still 300 meters from the small river. Next came digging the irrigation channels. Each direction had its purpose. 20 channels were dug horizontally, each less than a meter wide and about half a meter deep, stretching straight south for 110 meters. The labor was arranged efficiently. 50 adults were mobilized each time. The tribe happened to have exactly 50 shovels. Each person was responsible for just over 2 meters, and a single channel could be dug in under half an hour. All 20 channels were completed in a single day. On the first day of the new year, as if on cue, a light drizzle began to fall unexpectedly. Everyone, having endured the long winter, breathed a sigh of relief. Winter was finally over. Meanwhile, other tribes were not idle either. They took this time to assess their winter losses, and the results were disheartening. The situation was grim across the board. Small tribes with fewer than 100 people had lost at least 10 members, mostly children and adult men. The winter had been unbearably long, and many tribes had run out of food before spring arrived. Left with no choice, they had to reluctantly abandon some of their children, watching them starve to death. Men braved the snow and wind to hunt. The lucky ones encountered solitary beasts or stumbled upon buried nuts. The unlucky either returned empty-handed and froze to death or encountered packs of wild animals and were wiped out. Even those who made it back often returned injured. Many lost ears, fingers, or toes to frostbite, and disabilities became all too common. In comparison, the Han tribe was incredibly fortunate. Not only had they avoided starvation, but they were also thriving. With ample food supplies, the elders decided that such a joyous occasion called for a spring sacrifice to pray for the tribe's prosperity in the new year. You did not object. Regarding the sacrifice, you had your own ideas. First, your tribe would not sacrifice living beings but instead honor their ancestors. Moreover, the ceremony needed to feel solemn and meaningful. You sketched a design and personally crafted a large wooden barrel and a ritual vessel. You also had the women of the tribe sew a flag from animal hides, embroidering a large Chinese character on it. Once everything was ready, you gathered all the tribespeople together, and the Han tribe held its first ever sacrificial ceremony. As the drums began to beat vigorously, the tribespeople instinctively started to dance. Their movements expressed both joy for their current fortunate lives and hope for a bright future. In that moment, they firmly believed that under your leadership, the tribe would grow stronger and stronger. After the ceremony concluded, everyone set to work according to your arrangements. With limited materials available, only 2 double-share plows in total, you selected 2 particularly docile bulls and personally harnessed them to the plows to begin tilling the land. But the wild bulls were still untamed and had no idea how to walk in a straight line. There was no other way. One person had to lead from the front, patiently guiding the bull by the nose, while another followed behind, steadily holding the plow to ensure the soil was tilled to the proper depth. The 2 bronze plowshares of the double-headed plow each time they entered the soil, They could turn over half a meter of land reaching a depth of 30 centimeters. The efficiency was quite impressive at this rate. The rice fields would be fully plowed in at most 3 days. Once that was done, the land would be finely leveled, water would be channeled in, and then it would be time to sow the rice seeds. Row after row of land, churned by the plowshares, completely transformed in appearance from its original faint green surface, turned into loose, brown, crumbly soil. A group of teenagers who had only joined the tribe in winter carried vine baskets, lining up along the newly plowed land, carefully picking out the exposed roots and debris from the soil. After much deliberation, you decided to put off fertilizing for now. For one, you hadn't prepared any fertilizer in advance, and secondly, this land was truly being cultivated for the first time. It had more than enough fertility for one round of crops. It took a full 3 days to finish plowing and leveling the fields, but as you observed the still chilly weather in the early mornings and evenings, you began to worry. If seeds were sown now, they'd likely freeze to death overnight. Still, there was no shortage of other tasks to tackle. The grass seeds brought back earlier were just right for sowing now. Those seeds of forage grass and woody fibers would later become the staple feed for the tribe's livestock to the west of the Han tribe's settlement. A pasture had been planned out earlier. Dahua, carrying a bag filled with grass seeds, spread out along the edges of the pasture, evenly scattering the seeds. As he walked, there was no need to worry about their survival. The ground, still damp from the spring rain, was slightly muddy. The grass seeds took root quickly. As soon as they touched the soil, tender green sprouts would emerge in just a few days. With rice temporarily unplantable, and the tribe having no shortage of food or clothing, what to do with this newfound free time? You slapped your forehead in realization, deciding to upgrade everyone's footwear. First, you gathered the women of the tribe and personally demonstrated how to weave straw sandals. The task wasn't difficult, crisscrossing straw to form the shape of a sole, then tying it to the foot with a few thin straw ropes. As soon as the straw sandals were introduced, tribespeople eagerly followed suit. They also took the opportunity to conduct a spring cleaning. Crowds flocked to the small riverbank, some bathing, others scrubbing leather shoes, some washing animal hides. A few hardy men, unfazed by the cold, went a step further, weaving and wearing grass skirts. Straight away in the memories of this body's original owner, wearing grass skirts in spring and summer was common. Some even went bare-chested. Intrigued, you decided to try weaving a grass skirt yourself, but no sooner had you put it on than Ro Bao and Hui Shan, as if spotting something extraordinary, chased after you gleefully. With a nudge of their noses, they tore the grass skirt to shreds and happily munched on it. You couldn't help but laugh in exasperation, sheepishly changing back into your animal hide clothes. Just then the elder rushed over in a panic, holding up the nearly depleted salt supply. Your heart sank immediately. The brief respite you'd enjoyed tightened back into tension. Salt was a crucial resource for the tribe's survival. A solution had to be found quickly. After much thought, you decided to have everyone rely on salted meat. For the time being, it contained plenty of salt, which could temporarily supplement their salt intake. But the elder frowned. Aren't we going to gather salt? I heard there's salt in the cave at West Mountain. You shook your head. The salt is deep inside that small cave, only children could fit through, but I can't let them take such risks. Still, don't worry, I have a way to make tools for mining. We're just short on materials right now. We need to dig for or in 8 Treasures Mountain. And so, the tribe temporarily relied on smoked meat. Working together with determination, they hurriedly plowed the 20 plots of rice fields by the drinking water river. After their hard work, all 64 acres of rice fields were turned and ready. The mining plan was finally set in motion. A group of men, grunting with effort, carried a newly built wooden boat to the banks of the drinking water river. The 3-meter-wide wooden boat placed in the 4-meter-wide river appeared exceptionally massive. The tribespeople stood on the riverbank, watching the vessel floating on the water, murmuring incessantly, "Can this boat really carry people? Won't we fall into the water as soon as we step on it?" Without a word, you lifted your leg and stepped onto the boat in one swift motion. The wooden vessel swayed a few times in the water before stabilizing firmly on the surface. Then, turning your head, you shouted to the crowd, "Who else is coming? Those who don't board now will have to pull the boat from the shore later." Seeing this, the others grew bolder, and with a series of splashes, several people followed you onto the boat. Once everything was ready, a team of 26 people set off in grand formation. Each of them was strong and well-equipped, carrying a spear, a longbow, a bronze shovel, and a sword fox. Additionally, every person carried 50 feathered arrows. The 4 men from the Big Tree tribe had even brought along a short-handled bronze axe. The scene by the river was bustling with excitement. Men, women, and children from the tribe had gathered along the bank. The women busied themselves loading dried meat and other supplies onto the wooden boat, while children, leading 8 wolf pups, hopped and skipped along the shore, watching the commotion. Chu Bing, looking reluctant, tugged at the corner of your clothes and handed you a snakeskin water pouch. You smiled, ruffled his head, and said softly, "I'm just going to dig up some stones this time. I'll be back soon." Once everyone was on board, the boat traveled upstream along the drinking water river. Though moving against the current was slower, it was still much faster than walking. Within a few hours, They reached the spot where the chieftain had first encountered the big tree tribe, at the edge of the dark forest. After disembarking, the chieftain quickly issued orders. "We've been tired all morning. Let's cook and rest first. After the meal, we'll load the tools and supplies onto the oxen. Everyone will help drag the boat into the woods. Mutun, who knows the terrain well, and the 4 youths from the Black Rat tribe will stay behind to guard it. The remaining 20 of us will each lead an ox and follow me to mine." Turning to Mutun, the chieftain added in detail, "Mutun, are you up for this? I'll leave some food for the 5 of you. You'll need to stand guard here for about 7 sunsets. If you spot enemies you can't handle, abandon the boat and flee toward 8 Treasures Mountain. Whatever you do, don't lead them back to the tribe. Our women and children are still there." After lunch, the group hid the wooden boat securely, and the mining team continued on their way. But who could have predicted that in the dead of night, as everyone slept fitfully, a rustling sound spread through the surroundings, as if something massive was moving through the forest. Then, a furious roar erupted, deafening to the ears. Startled, everyone leaped up from the ground. Lifting their eyes, they saw a primate covered in golden-red fur, with explosively developed muscles, charging straight toward the Han tribe's campsite, claws bared and teeth gnashing. Gui Shan and Ro Ro, the 2 fierce hounds, were the first to respond with angry barks as they rushed toward the giant ape. The giant ape didn't hesitate either. It pounced down from the trees and, with a sweep of its arms, effortlessly sent Huishan flying. Watching this, your heart leaped into your throat. Hurriedly, you urged everyone to grab their weapons while you, trembling, groped around on the ground. Only when you grasped the golden spear did you feel a sliver of confidence. The others also tightened their grips on their spears, but they were so terrified that their legs shook uncontrollably, making it hard to stand steady. The giant beast showed no signs of relenting. After landing, it opened its mouth, dripping with thick saliva, and let out another roar that made everyone's heads ring. Battling through the headache, you commanded everyone to raise their wooden spears and attack. As you spoke, you were the first to thrust your golden spear toward the giant ape's chest. But the ape's strength was astonishing. It seized the wooden shaft of the spear and, with a swing of its arm, sent both the chieftain and Dali flying. They crashed heavily against a tree trunk. In the blink of an eye, the giant ape. With a backhand, he grabbed a youth from the Black Rat tribe. Crack, he snapped the boy's neck. He then hurled the corpse like a weapon into the crowd. Instantly, chaos erupted as people scrambled to disperse and flee to a safer distance. Using spears and arrows, you struggled to your feet, shouting hoarsely. Only then did the crowd snap out of their daze and scatter. Seizing the opportunity, One Ear gripped his spear and thrust it toward the giant ape's chest, but only managed to sink half the spearhead in. The giant ape seized the shaft, snapping it and grabbing One Ear's head. By now, Black Mountain had recovered, roaring as he charged again, ambushing the giant from behind. He succeeded in slamming the giant away. Enraged by the pain, the giant flew into a violent frenzy, wrenching off one of Grey Mountain's tusks with a backhand motion. Blood sprayed like arrows. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, you spotted an opening. The giant, injured and slowed, and hurled your spear. You shouted for the tribesmen to use their spears. Encouraged, they all joined in. Spears and long shafts pierced the giant's chest from all directions. The giant struggled briefly, coughed up a mouthful of blood, and collapsed with a thunderous crash, moving no more. After this brutal battle, the Han tribe had suffered heavy losses. 2 youths lay dead. One Ear's chest was gouged open, and he was slammed so hard he suffered a concussion, losing 3 large molars. Many others sustained minor injuries. Before anyone could catch their breath, a clamor of shouts broke the eternal silence. Your heart sank. Something was wrong. A large number of enemies were still out there. Everyone, prepare for battle. That giant might have been a warrior from the cannibal tribe. Then you called out to Big Tree. Big Tree, take 5 youths and all our cattle. Bring the wounded and the dead, and head straight for 8 Treasures Mountain. Once there, find a place to camp. If you can't find food, slaughter a cow. Big Tree's face showed reluctance, his eyes red as he retorted, Chief, where will you go? Stamping your foot in urgency, you replied, We'll stay here to draw the enemy's attention, buying you time to escape. Big Tree wanted to argue further, but seeing the fury in your eyes, he had no choice but to lead the group away hastily. You then turned to the remaining tribesmen, lowering your voice to instruct them, Grab your bows and follow me. Each of you, take a torch from the bonfire and throw it ahead. When the enemy approaches, the light will help us aim. Everyone obeyed without a word. The torches lit up a small area. As they hid in the darkness, nerves taut. Stay quiet, everyone. Wait for my command to shoot when the enemy is close. After firing one arrow, don't worry about hitting, run immediately. Our goal is to lure them elsewhere. The enemy drew nearer. In the faint torchlight, they could be seen naked, bodies painted with eerie totems, and adorned with human bone necklaces. They looked savage and menacing, cannibals. The leader of the cannibal hunting party spotted the giant's corpse and immediately turned pale with fear. Everyone, come quick. Our master has been killed. Though you couldn't understand their words, you sensed the danger. Seizing the moment, you yelled, "Fire!" 11 arrows shot out in an instant, each finding its mark. The enemy fell into disarray. Then you shouted, "Everyone, run!" deliberately leading the enemy southward in pursuit. The chase led them near the Black Rat tribe. At that moment, the Black Rat tribe was peacefully preparing breakfast. A woman fetching water from the west suddenly spotted a group of armed foreign men sneaking closer furtively. Terrified, she nearly dropped her bucket, abandoning the water entirely as she turned and fled toward the tribe, screaming, "Enemies are coming!" Hearing the cries, Chief Shuda immediately ordered the men to arm themselves with stone spears, while the women gathered stones to defend from behind. But the cannibals paid no heed. Upon arrival, they launched a volley of stone projectiles. The Black Rat tribe had no shields, and everyone scrambled for cover, throwing their formation into chaos. Immediately after, the cannibals hurled their javelins. Several members of the Black Rat tribe fell instantly. Rat Daji's eyes turned red with fury. He quickly rallied his tribesmen to retaliate with their own javelins. "Hurry! Throw the javelins! Don't let them breach the wall!" But their javelins were of poor quality and lacked sufficient range. After a volley, the effect was minimal. Seizing the opportunity, the cannibals rushed to the wall and, with combined effort, toppled the fence barrier. The two sides clashed in close combat, engaging in a brutal melee. Just as the Black Rat tribe was on the brink of collapse, you and the Han tribe descended like divine warriors, charging from behind the enemy. First, you unleashed a rain of arrows from a distance. One feathered arrow struck an enemy in the back as he pushed against the wall, and he fell dead on the spot. The members of the Black Rat tribe were stunned. Shu Wu, recognizing you as the leader of the Han tribe, immediately shouted excitedly, "It's the Han tribe's leader. Has he come to save us?" Then the Han tribe warriors, using the terrain to their advantage, rained down arrows like a storm, catching the cannibals off guard. The enemy suffered heavy casualties. After several rounds of mounted archery, you shouted, "Cease fire! Grab your bronze spears and follow me into battle." Like tigers descending a mountain, the warriors charged into the enemy ranks. The tide of the battle turned instantly. Before long, the cannibals were utterly defeated and annihilated. As the fighting concluded, Shu Wu gratefully grasped your hand and asked, "Leader of the Han tribe, thank you for helping my tribe defeat the enemy. How did you know we were in danger here?" Your heart skipped a beat, but you maintained a calm expression and fabricated a story. "We were gathering resources far from here and passed through the dark forest to your north. There, we encountered the cannibal tribe. They sent a red-haired cannibal to attack us, but we killed him. Then the cannibals continued toward your tribe. We intended to warn you, but the enemy outpaced us. That's why we ended up here." Upon hearing about the red-haired cannibal, Shu Wu turned pale with fear and stammered, "That's the devil living in the Black Mountains. Our ancestors once encountered them. They bring disaster to our tribe." He then led you into his tent and pointed at a petrified object, recounting an ancient legend. It turned out that the giant creature would capture people from the tribe, taming them into cannibals and taking them back as food. The Black Rat tribe listened in terror. Ratta urgently pleaded with the Han tribe leader, "You must help us. Teach us how to defeat the giant ape." Hearing this, you shook your head with a bitter smile. "I don't know how to defeat that monster either. We can only rely on sturdy brick walls for defense." This time, we managed to defeat the giant ape only with the help of Turtle Mountain. Shu Wu and Ratta exchanged glances, their faces filled with worry. Then, Shu Wu tentatively asked, "Leader of the Han tribe, could our Black Rat tribe also build such walls?" Seizing the opportunity, you extended an invitation. "No. Even our Han tribe would need a lot of time, population, and resources to construct such tall, sturdy walls. But if you join us in building the wall, it will be large enough for all of us to live together. We can work side by side, and in time, everyone will have plenty of food and the best weapons. Shu Wu and Rat De immediately discussed the matter. Joining the Han tribe was indeed the best option. It offered both safety and powerful weapons. The two then approached Yu and solemnly declared, "Leader of the Han tribe, we agree to join your tribe. We hope you will treat our people as your own." Overjoyed, Yu replied, "Of course. Welcome to the Han tribe. From now on, you are all my people. I treat all tribespeople equally." Next, after arranging the relocation of the Black Mouse tribe, I led the team to continue mining and reunited with Big Tree. All the injured were gradually recovering, and everyone wasted no time getting straight to work. At the Baobao Mountain mine, Crazy and the others put in their utmost effort to mine red cinnabar and realgar, extracting a considerable amount. They also deliberately gathered some lime and iron sulfide, planning to use the iron sulfide to extract sulfuric acid. That way, they could break open the entrance to the rock mine. When it was time to return after mining, there wasn't a single hitch. We arrived back at the small river and met Mu Tun and the others who had stayed behind with the wooden boats. The boats, loaded with or sat deep in the water, barely managing to squeeze in a few more people to paddle downstream. We moved swiftly, and before long we spotted the tribespeople waiting on the shore, along with the newly joined Black Mouse tribe. Everyone watched as we returned fully laden, cheering joyfully from the riverbank. The men immediately gathered around to help unload the ore. But I frowned. With more tribespeople now, how to accommodate everyone had become a major issue. The original cave was cramped and crowded, completely inadequate for so many people. There was no other choice. Everyone had to set up tents in the open space inside the walls. Fortunately, the Black Mouse tribe wasn't too particular. They were already used to living in tents. Moreover, upon arriving at the Han tribe and seeing the mountains of meat and animal hides, as well as the abundance of lively livestock, they were overjoyed. Without a word, they promptly started setting up their tents. Then I informed everyone that from now on, all toilet needs must be taken care of in a designated area. That waste was a natural resource for medicine and must not be wasted under any circumstances. Once the tent situation was sorted out, I turned to Cripple and instructed, "You'll need to fire more pottery in the coming days for the new tribespeople to use. Also, make more water jars. I'll need those." Cripple felt a bit reluctant inwardly. "We brought back so much copper, or aren't we going to smelt it now?" I praised him a few words as if coaxing a child. "Let Big Mouth and the others handle the copper smelting for now. You can take over during the final purification stage. For now, focus on firing pottery. You're the best at pottery making in the tribe. I don't trust anyone else's work." Hearing this, Cripple's reluctance instantly vanished. Beaming, he promised to fire the pottery perfectly. Everyone worked together, bustling with activity until evening. A cluster of simple, dome-shaped thatched huts seemed to magically spring up. That night, old and new tribespeople sat together, enjoying their first lively dinner as one. Throughout the meal, there was laughter and conversation, and the bonds among the tribespeople grew imperceptibly closer. After the meal, the men gathered in groups, eagerly studying the Han tribe's sharp weapons and ingenious tools. The women weren't idle either. They sat together, exchanging methods for weaving straw sandals and vine baskets. The newcomers listened attentively, gradually picking up vocabulary from the Han language. While everyone was occupied with their tasks, I took a copper shovel and a small cart, quietly working near the animal pens and latrines. The elder happened to see this and approached, puzzled. "What are you digging the latrine for? Is there any use for what's in there?" Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel annoyed. Irritated, I retorted, "I'm not digging up waste. I'm digging the soil beside the latrine." The elder was even more confused. "What use does the chief have for that soil? It's not for firing pottery. You should focus on finding a way to mine the rock. With so many new tribespeople, the salt in our village won't last much longer." Bottling up my frustration, I snapped impatiently, "Can't you see I'm preparing for it? I'm digging this soil to open the rock mine. Just leave it be. I know what I'm doing." The elder stood there, watching your busy figure from behind, filled with doubt that digging in the dirt could possibly uncover a rock mine. Could it be that the chief was just making excuses? But in truth, you knew the situation as clearly as a polished mirror. This blue soil near the latrine contains saltpeter. Extracting it allows for the production of explosives. Only with explosives can we blast open the eye sockets. You direct several women to purify the saltpeter. The process is remarkably similar to refining salt. By the next day, glistening white saltpeter crystals had been successfully obtained. But obtaining saltpeter wasn't the end of the task. We still needed to find a way to produce nitric acid and glycerol, and then synthesize the powerful nitroglycerin. Glycerol had to be separated from fats. Fortunately, after the wolf attacks during the winter, the tribe had harvested a large amount of animal fat, so raw materials were not in short supply. Nitric acid, on the other hand, required a reaction between saltpeter and sulfuric acid. But at the moment, we had no sulfuric acid on hand. You turned your attention to pyrite. Without delay, you carefully selected a flat area near the usual charcoal burning site and began working methodically. First, you piled up a stack of firewood, then arranged layers of pyrite around the firewood, building it up into a small mound, burying the firewood securely within, leaving only a few ignition holes at the bottom. Next, you covered your pile with a layer of dry grass, and finally, a layer of wet mud, though you made sure to leave a few ventilation holes at the bottom and top. With everything ready, you used a thin branch dipped in fire solution to carefully ignite the firewood through the bottom ventilation holes. And in the blink of an eye, the ore was burning fiercely inside the mud shell. This heating and reduction reaction would take about half a month to complete. Taking advantage of this free time, you set about crafting distillation equipment to purify sulfuric acid. While the nitric acid and soda equipment dried, and the fine firing process was underway, you confidently left these tasks to cripple and took the opportunity to check on the livestock being raised. As the weather grew warmer, the animals in the tribe seemed to have coordinated and began shedding their fur all at once. Seeing this, you slapped your thigh. The timing was perfect. You hurriedly began preparing for sowing. Stored in the warehouse were wild rice seeds, peanuts, chili seeds, and even seeds of the lowly hemp and man-eating trees. The peanuts needed to be shelled and soaked first. You gathered a few quick-handed girls, found an open space, sat on the ground, and started working. Xianxia happened to pass by and, seeing this scene, approached with a puzzled expression, asking, "Chieftain, what are you all doing? Why aren't we eating these nuts?" Without stopping your work, you smiled and explained, "We're going to plant these nuts now. Remember, these are called peanuts, Xiu." The young man repeated the word a few times but still didn't understand. "And what is planting?" Patiently, you counted on your fingers as you explained. "Planting means that in the spring we bury these nuts in the soil, water them a little, and they'll grow into plants. By autumn, one buried peanut will surely yield dozens, even hundreds more. If we plant these 4 baskets, we'll harvest at least 400, maybe even thousands of baskets by then." Xiu's jaw nearly hit the ground in astonishment. Wide-eyed, he couldn't believe it. You nodded firmly. "As long as we plant them well, we might even get more. And it's not just peanuts we're planting, we're also planting rice. Rice is even better. Plant 1 grain in spring, and by autumn it'll multiply at least 10,000 times. This is what I meant earlier about using this land to feed 6,000 people." Xianxia, who had been listening intently nearby, quickly stepped forward and said, "Chieftain, I think we should really put effort into this. This planting sounds much more important than hunting." You nodded approvingly. Xianxia, after all, had once been a chieftain. He grasped the concept immediately. Xianxia then seemed to suddenly remember something and exclaimed excitedly, "Chieftain, I just remembered. When we moved, we brought several bags of peanuts with us. Can we plant those too? We're not short on food now, so I think we should plant those as well." Hearing this, your face lit up with delight. "That's fantastic. Go get someone to sort out those peanuts right away. Make sure to pick only the intact ones." The rat shaman nodded repeatedly, leaning on his cane as he hurried off to instruct his former clansmen about the knowledge. Rat Eyes watched the shaman leave with eager eyes, anxiously asking the chief, "What about me? What should I do?" You smiled and said, "Gather a few people and come with me to plow the fields." Upon hearing this, Xianxia immediately rushed off excitedly to call people. That afternoon, you marked out 100 acres for peanut fields and 36 acres for chili fields south of the rice paddies. Combined with the other crops, the total area reached 200 acres. Early the next morning, Rat Eyes followed the clansmen, carefully learning how to hitch the bronze plow to the oxen. An experienced Han tribe woman led the ox from the front while Rat Eyes steadied the plow from behind. Watching the soil turn over like waves as the bronze plow advanced, Rat Eyes was both amazed and fascinated. With 2 oxen and 4 plowshares working together, the progress was remarkably fast. You weren't idle either, having already soaked 22 gen of rice seeds in a water vat. These seeds needed to soak for over 24 hours. While the seeds were being purified, you selected the westernmost plot of the rice field, opened the irrigation channel, and began flooding it to prepare as a seedling nursery. After sorting the peanut seeds, you soaked them as well. Peanuts are a direct-seeded crop that can be sown directly in the field, but only if the soil is properly prepared. To ensure rice, peanuts, and chilies could be planted simultaneously, Shuda and his team worked with tremendous effort. The task of preparing 136 acres kept them working from dawn till dusk. Though everyone was exhausted and sore, their enthusiasm never waned. When people tired, others took over. When oxen tired, fresh ones replaced them. 2 bronze plows flew through the soil continuously. In less than 2 days, all the planned fields had been turned. The soil became loose and aerated, weeds were completely cleared, creating perfect farmland. The soaked seeds were retrieved, carefully covered with straw, watered, and placed near the charcoal kiln to hasten germination. On the 3rd day, everyone began evenly spreading the sprouted rice seeds across the fields, lightly covering them with a thin layer of soil. Finally, they breached the irrigation channel to slowly flood the fields. Planting peanut seeds required particular care. Rows half a meter apart, with plants spaced 15 centimeters within rows. The planters held a bowl of peanuts in their left hand and a 15-centimeter pointed wooden shovel in their right. They'd measure with the shovel, dig a small hole, place 2 peanuts, cover with soil, then move to the next spot. This process repeated until all were planted, followed by collective watering. The chili planting method was similar to peanuts. Half-meter rows with 30-centimeter spacing between plants. Dig holes, scatter seeds, cover with soil and water, all done in one smooth motion. During the entire planting period, nearly all 200 Han tribespeople worked in the fields, including you. Many hands made light work. The 140 acres of farming tasks were completed in half a day without anyone feeling particularly tired. The day after planting, the tribe returned to normal routines. The lame man continued pottery making, and you selected several older children from the new clansmen to assist him. The pottery produced needed to meet both daily needs of the new members and maintain surplus for future trade with other tribes. Monkey, Big Mouth, and the Mao brothers focused entirely on bronze smelting. Noting their increasing skill, you planned to assign them more helpers and were currently selecting candidates. With upgraded equipment, the hunting team found hunting as easy as cutting melons and vegetables. Prey became so abundant they couldn't consume it all, but the hot weather made preservation difficult. The hunting team had to suspend operations and remain in the village. You wouldn't let them stay idle. Some were sent to the back hills to collect carnivorous tree thorns. These thorns served both as arrowheads and strategic supplies that needed stockpiling in large quantities, while also allowing opportunities to plant more carnivorous trees. Others were assigned to fell trees, trunks reserved for construction and tool-making, branches dried for firewood. Another group went into the jungle to catch chickens, as you were determined to expand the breeding population. Poultry and fur are perfect for exploitation. You can't just go catch wild chickens every time you need to use them. So sustainable farming is necessary. There are many bird species suitable for farming near the tribe, like the bellybirds, grouse, guinea fowls, and your favorite red-tailed black chickens. You marked out an area next to the rabbit pen, using bricks, sticks, and thatch to build chicken coops, surrounding them with fences as tall as a person. Once the captured chickens have their wing and tail feathers plucked, they can't fly even in the rain. For feed, you gather wild vegetables from nearby pastures. Clover and ryegrass are growing vigorously, enough to feed both chickens and rabbits. On the morning of the 3rd day, the rat shaman and the elder, 2 old men, huddled together, whispering excitedly about something. They had spotted you building the fence earlier. The elder shouted hoarsely, "Chief, come quick! That rice you mentioned has sprouted." You were still a bit groggy, but upon hearing this, you instantly perked up, sprinting straight to the rice field. Looking at the paddy, the seedling bed was densely covered with tender green shoots. The seeds had germinated and broken through the soil. Your eyes instantly welled up, voice choked with emotion. "Good. It really grew. I can eat rice again." The elder, seeing your state, asked puzzled, "Chief, what's wrong?" You composed yourself and turned to instruct him. "Nothing. I'm just happy. By the way, both of you go tell all the tribespeople. No one is to walk through the fields. If anyone tramples these seedlings, they'll be punished with no food for a day. Have the children keep an eye on the livestock and wolf pups. don't let them into the fields. Anyone who breaks this rule goes hungry for a day. Whoever damages these food sources will lose their own rations. The rat shaman suggested, Chief, why don't we surround it with a branch fence? You waved your hand. No need. It would waste too much manpower and time. Just make the prohibition clear to everyone. As expected, during breakfast, when everyone heard the ban, no one objected. They all knew these seedlings were future food. By the 7th day, peanuts and chili peppers had also sprouted one after another. The rice grew its first leaves, turning the fields lush green and full of vitality. In the chicken coop, the number of black chickens had increased to over 30. The rabbits were also about to give birth. Looking at the livestock in the pens, you started pondering the four-wheeled cart that hadn't been built yet. Metal production was key to the tribe's development. Many plans had been put on hold due to previous or shortages. But now, with ample or projects like harnesses, four-wheeled carts, and wooden barrels could be resumed. Making harnesses wasn't too difficult. They'd be perfect for the great horned deer. After crafting the harness, you eagerly led a sturdy adult male great horned deer, fitted it with the harness, mounted it, and circled the grassland west of the tribe. This scene was just spotted by new tribesmen returning from catching chickens. One said enviously, "The chief is amazing. I want to ride that deer too. It must run really fast." His companion chimed in, "Of course the chief is amazing. He invented so many things for the tribe: pottery firing, copper smelting, animal husbandry, peanut farming. I heard the chief is even going to split a mountain." Split a mountain? What mountain? Can mountains even be split? I heard it's about quarrying rocks, for that salty stuff we eat. Not sure if it's true though. Don't tell anyone. Don't worry. I just want to see how he splits a mountain. You see the bows and arrows the hunters use? They're deadly, can kill from far away. The chief invented those. I want one too. I heard the carpenters are making them. After riding for a while, you dismounted and led the deer back to its pen, then got busy with the wooden barrels. The tribe lacked portable water storage containers. Pottery was fragile and had poor sealing, so wooden barrels were needed. Making barrels required skill. Simply tightly fitting planks together wasn't enough for a proper seal. You had already planned the dimensions, selected leftover fir wood from boat building, and had Mutun and others follow your instructions to craft them. Thus, barrels of various sizes gradually came into existence within the Han tribe. Transport type, everyday use type, with handles available in all varieties. The elder stared at these barrels. He couldn't help but ask, "What are we making so many barrels for?" You smiled and explained, "Of course for use. If we have extras, we can trade them with other tribes. These barrels are much more practical for carrying water than clay pots. Definitely something people will value. But without 10 strong young men in return, I won't agree to it." With the wooden barrels settled, you immediately turned your full attention to the carts. The most crucial component of a cart is the wheel. The manufacturing process is intricate, and the load-bearing requirements are high. The old methods used for making pushcarts simply wouldn't suffice. After some thought, you gave Muduin 2 sets of precise measurements, emphatically instructing him, "Follow these dimensions to make 4 wheels, 2 large and 2 small. Make sure to select sturdy wood." Muduin took the wooden board, densely covered with measurements, and pulled out a bronze gauge to carefully compare the markings. He nodded repeatedly. "No problem, Chief. You can rest assured." The large wheels would take a long time to make, and you had no time to wait around. Turning away, you went to attend to other pressing matters. In the blink of an eye, the mud-coated pyrite had been burning for 11 days. Seeing that the time was about right, the next step required producing nitric acid. To avoid unnecessary risks, you decided to isolate yourself from the tribe and complete the remaining steps alone. After 2 full days of hard work, you finally obtained 2 large jars of sulfuric acid and about 100 gene of iron oxide crystals. These crystals were genuine iron powder, the foundation for forging iron tools in the future. With sulfuric acid on hand, obtaining nitric acid through clever means became much simpler. You brought out a brand new distillation setup, placed the women's refined saltpeter and sulfuric acid into the distillation flask, and soon enough, nitric acid was ready. With both nitric acid and concentrated glycerol prepared, you still didn't dare let your guard down. Nitroglycerin is notoriously volatile. A slight bump or even a rise in temperature could cause it to explode instantly. For safety's sake, mixing it just before use was the best strategy. Now everything was ready except for the final step. You turned and instructed Casey. Cast a batch of nozzles with a 5-to-2 ratio, and make one of them round-tipped. We'll use arrows to detonate it from a distance. It's relatively safer and more reliable. Early the next morning, you stood in the center of the tribe and shouted at the top of your lungs. Women, stay and guard the tribe today. All men, bring your tools and follow me. We're going to gather salt. This shout ignited the crowd's excitement. Everyone was eager and ready. Shuwu heard this and hurried over, pleading with hopeful eyes. Chief, can I come along? I want to see it with my own eyes. Subing, ever the clever one, ran over and hugged your leg, shaking it while whining. I want to go too. I promise I'll behave. You looked down at Subing, thought for a moment, and nodded in agreement. All right, you two can come. The elder will stay and watch over the tribe. The elder had no objections and readily agreed. Though he was deeply curious, the tribe still needed someone to guard it. Subing, overjoyed that he could go, leaped with excitement and hurried off to fetch his benbin. Soon, a team of over 50 people set off in a grand procession. Bao and Huishan led the way majestically at the front. The group carried bronze shovels, bows and arrows, and led oxen laden with large baskets and wooden tools. Subing rode on benbin, his little head turning left and right, his face beaming with excitement. You steadily carried 2 jars, one containing nitric acid, the other glycerol. The team marched until mid-afternoon, finally arriving at the mysterious cave of the former Xietting tribe. With a wave of your hand, you told everyone to take a break and have something to eat. They all set down their gear and had a simple lunch to replenish their energy. Half an hour later, you stood up, clapped your hands, and called everyone to start working. Several strong men immediately gathered around the cave entrance. Heave-ho! Heave-ho! They chanted as they moved the large rocks blocking the cave entrance. Dolly scratched his head, looking puzzled. This cave is so small. How do we open it? These rocks are incredibly hard. We never even dared to use stones like these for our magic stone basins before. Squinting at the entrance, you spoke calmly. Use these 2 jars I brought. Everyone, step outside with your bronze shovels and get ready to dig a pit. You then handed a torch to Dashu and pointed at the cave entrance. Take this torch and place it right at the mouth of the cave. I'll go outside to find a spot. Dashu took the torch without a word and quickly positioned himself at the entrance. Stepping out of the cave, you scanned the surroundings with sharp, focused eyes. About 80 meters away, you found an ideal small mound. The view was clear, allowing you to see Dashu's torch plainly, indicating a straight line of sight to the cave entrance. Perfect for archery. You broke off a branch and thrust it firmly into the ground as a marker, then called out loudly, "A few of you, come dig here." The pit needs to be half a person's depth, deep enough to stand in and reach your waist. Pile the excavated soil on the side facing the cave entrance and pack it down firmly with your shovels. The group responded promptly, hoisting their shovels and digging swiftly. Once the pit was nearly finished, you instructed everyone. Take all the cattle and head to Tugu Ridge, about a kilometer away. Wait at the foot of the slope. There's going to be a loud noise here. The ground will shake. Once everything's quiet, come back to this pit to find me. The clanspeople nodded solemnly and led the cattle away into the distance. You hurriedly grabbed the 2 jars and entered the cave. Inside, the dim light from the flickering fire cast an oppressive, tense atmosphere. Taking a deep breath, you slowly opened the jar containing concentrated glycerin and carefully added nitric acid drop by drop. Using a pure wooden stirring rod, you mixed the contents with painstaking caution. The process took over 10 minutes, each movement deliberate and measured, fearing the slightest mistake could trigger an explosion. Finally, you had a full jar of nitroglycerin. Steadying it with both hands, you placed it at the cave entrance, securing it carefully with stones to ensure it wouldn't budge. Then, crouching low, you moved further inside, lighting a fire to illuminate the space so you could see the target clearly from outside. With everything set, you hurried to the shelter, your heart pounding and a fine sweat beading on your forehead. Though nerves gripped you, your gaze remained resolute, fixed on the clay jar in front of the firelight inside the cave. You were about 80 meters from the entrance, and the cave extended another 35 meters inward, placing the blast center just 115 meters away. Normally, such a distance was nothing for your archery skills, but this shot would determine success or failure. Suppressing your tension, you forced yourself to calm down. Seeing that the fire had burned sufficiently, you slowly raised your bow, took aim and released the arrow. With a whoosh, the arrow shot forth like a meteor. Without a moment's delay, you flung the bow aside, dropped into a crouch, and covered your ears tightly, mouth agape. The next instant, a deafening explosion roared like the heavens splitting apart. A shockwave surged outwards in a ring, swift and violent, shattering even the hardest granite in its path. The cave entrance was blown into a gaping, bottomless pit, exposing the large mineral rocks hidden deep within. The cave ceiling shattered completely, sending rocks flying skyward like rain before crashing down. Dust billowed hundreds of meters away, and the blast from the entrance, carrying soil and stones, roared like a demon, sweeping everything in its wake. The soil in front of the barricade gave way before you could dodge, burying you directly beneath it. The shockwave rampaged through the area, instantly bursting birds within a 500-meter radius. Tree branches were torn from their roots, and the forest's birds and beasts panicked, screeching as they fled in all directions. Yet many were still killed on the spot by the shockwave. A kilometer away on Tobu Ridge, the Han tribe waited anxiously. Suddenly, a violent tremor struck. Shu Wu, leaning on his tombstaff, stumbled and fell to the ground. Immediately after, the terrifying roar of the explosion rolled in. Everyone looked up in horror to see countless rocks and debris soaring high like fireworks. Millstone-sized stones whistled through the air, flying 400 to 500 meters, while fist-sized rocks even reached Togu Ridge. The wild oxen, terrified beyond measure, struggled desperately but were tightly bound to trees and unable to move. Ben's legs gave out in fear, and he collapsed to the ground. Ro Bao and Hui Shan panicked, sprinting down the hillside, covering their faces tightly with their large ears as they huddled in a corner, trembling. Deshu shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, get down! Avoid the flying stones!" The group snapped to awareness, throwing themselves to the ground. Shu De stood frozen in place, utterly stunned, unable to believe the scene before his eyes. The gale-force winds stirred by the shockwave carried massive amounts of soil, forming a dust storm that blotted out the sky and swept across the surroundings. Minutes later, the elders back in the Han tribe also heard the tremendous noise and saw a vast flock of birds startled into flight in the distance. The elder waved his staff excitedly, shouting hoarsely, "It's Sholi! Sholi really did it. He blasted open the mountain." The women and children who had stayed behind cheered and leaped for joy. "Wonderful! We'll have more time now." Meanwhile, east of the small river in the Li tribe, Chief Mao Li was leading a hunting party when the same earth-shattering roar erupted. The group turned back in alarm to see dust billowing into the western sky. Mao Li muttered in confusion, "What happened over there? Is the heavenly god unleashing his power?" One tribesman trembled as he said, "It seems to be from the direction of the small river." Mao Li steadied himself. "Let's head back and ask Wu. He communicates with the spirits. Maybe he knows what's going on." With that, he shouldered their game and led the group hurriedly back to the tribe. Deep in the forest over 10 kilometers south of the karst cave, a group of more than 50 people was on the move. This was the Chuan tribe, constantly wandering and shuttling between tribes, responsible for delivering messages and facilitating connections. Their leader was a sturdy young man around 20 years old named Fu, clutching a simple map marked with river flows and mountain ranges. Suddenly, a deafening blast, like thunder from the heavens, echoed through the air. The group halted in alarm, exchanging uneasy glances, their faces paling. Fu raised his hand, signaling the team to stop, and listened intently, his ears perked and eyes sharply scanning the surroundings. A tribesman beside him cried out in panic, "Fu, that sound isn't right. Could some monster be behind this?" Fu frowned deeply and replied in a steady voice, "Stay calm. It sounds like it came from the northwest. Something this massive is anything but ordinary." He quickly spread the map on the ground, tracing the mountain range with his finger, a flicker of speculation in his eyes. The northwest is the Western Hills area. Usually, there's nothing there but some wild beasts. With a commotion like this today, could it be that some tribe is behind it? The group murmured among themselves, their faces tense and uncertain. Fu stood up, dusting himself off. "Enough chatter. Let's go check it out, but keep your weapons ready." Everyone nodded promptly, drawing stone axes and wooden spears from their waists as they cautiously advanced toward the source of the explosion. At that moment, the Western Hills karst cave lay half-collapsed from the blast. Dust blotted out the sky, lingering like a thick, yellow fog. We were already buried in the shelter pit. I felt the heavy soil pressing down on me from all sides, my chest tight and suffocating. Each breath felt like dragging fluid from my lungs. I twisted my body with all my might, my hands frantically clawing at the dirt, my mind fixated on one thought. I had to get out, and fast. After what felt like an eternity, faint, anxious shouts echoed from outside. "Chief! Chief! Where are you?" It was Shuda and the others. Their voices instantly revitalized me. Summoning every ounce of strength, I pushed upward, my hands digging like frenzied moles, shoving the soil aside. With a muffled grunt, my head finally broke through the surface. I gasped greedily for fresh air, my throat raw and raspy from inhaled dust as I shouted, "I'm here!" Shuda and the others rushed toward the sound, their eyes reddening at the sight of my disheveled state. Without a word, they dropped their bronze shovels and desperately cleared the remaining dirt from me with their bare hands, muttering, "Chief, we finally found you. You scared us half to death." That earlier noise nearly shattered our courage. Catching my breath, I stood with their support, dusted myself off, and smiled reassuringly. "I'm fine." Then, I quickly led everyone to inspect the salt deposit. Surrounded by the group, we slowly approached the cave. The once narrow entrance had transformed into a deep pit the size of several rooms, its walls layered with exposed, gleaming salt veins that shimmered enticingly in the sunlight, like a mountain of silver. The sight left everyone speechless, frozen in awe. Without delay, I urged them to start mining. Energized, they sprang into action. Some led oxen to haul wooden baskets to the pit's edge. Others carefully chipped large chunks of salt from the walls with bronze shovels and gently placed them into containers, while a few clever tribesmen wove simple ropes from vines to hoist the rocks. Amid the bustling activity, my peripheral vision caught something curled in the cave's shadows. My heart tightened. Drawing closer, my expression turned grave at the sight. Several children's mummified corpses. They were emaciated, dressed in tatters, their bodies twisted in corners as if they had died in extreme agony and despair. Tears welled in my eyes, a pang of sorrow gripping my heart. I turned and softly instructed, "Gather some dry firewood. Let's cremate these children properly and send them on their way." A few tribesmen nodded silently and went to collect the wood. Soon, a bonfire blazed inside the cave, its flames dancing, casting solemn light on everyone's faces. I led the way, gently placing the mummies on the pyre, murmuring prayers for these unknown, pitiful souls. As the fire grew, the bodies gradually turned to ashes, thin smoke rising as if carrying the children's spirits away. After handling this, I took a deep breath, rallied my spirits, and called out, "Everyone, work harder. Once we've gathered enough salt, we head back to the tribe." A unified cheer rose, and their movements became even more efficient. After much effort, the barrels and baskets were filled to the brim. Seeing the sky darken, I waved my hand. "That's enough for today. We've made a great haul. Let's return to the tribe and celebrate." The group erupted in cheers, leading the oxen and camels as we set off on the journey back. But we hadn't gone far when a rustling sound emerged from the southern woods, growing louder. Instantly alert, I raised my hand to halt the group, swiftly drawing my bow and arrow, and whispered hoarsely, "Quiet, everyone! Stay on guard." At my command, they gripped their weapons tightly, assuming defensive stances, all eyes fixed on the woods. In the blink of an eye, a group clad in animal skins appeared. The stranger wielding a chance-found weapon, they emerged from the forest in a single file. At the forefront was the leader of the nomad tribe, Fu. He raised his hands high, signaling that he meant no harm. "We are from the nomad tribe, just passing through. We heard a huge commotion over here and thought we'd come see what was going on. I've never heard of you. What exactly are you doing here?" Fu explained, "Our nomad tribe usually has no fixed home. We specialize in running errands between tribes, delivering messages, and organizing gatherings. As it happens, we just stumbled upon all this noise you're making. We were simply curious. And I see your group is well equipped. Must be a large tribe. We thought we'd try to make friends." He narrowed his eyes slightly, scrutinizing Fu up and down. Secretly, he thought this group's arrival is suspicious. Even if they claim no ill intent, it's better to be cautious. Then, without showing any emotion, he asked, "So you say you want to be friends? What proof of sincerity do you have?" Fu scratched his head and smiled apologetically. "Sincerity? We know plenty of the latest news among the tribes, as well as information about resource distribution in various regions. We can share all that with you. Besides, if you ever need any errands run or help in the future, we'll do our utmost. He snorted. Words alone aren't enough. Talk is cheap. His eyes shifted, and a thought suddenly came to him. By the way, just a few days ago, we learned about a grand spring gathering. This gathering is the annual highlight for the surrounding tribes, where 10 tribes come together to exchange goods and compete in skills. This information should be quite useful for your tribe too. Upon hearing this, Yi's heart stirred. He knew well that for the tribe to develop in the long run, interaction with the outside world and access to more resources were essential. This spring gathering was undoubtedly a perfect opportunity. But he kept his expression neutral. It's just news of a spring gathering. Who knows if it's true? Even if it is, why would you tell us for no reason? You must have some ulterior motive. Fu gave an awkward laugh, rubbing his hands together. To be honest, we've been traveling non-stop, and our supplies are running low. Right now, we're so hungry our stomachs are sticking to our backs. If you could spare some food, I'd tell you everything I know about the spring gathering, holding nothing back. He frowned, turning to look at the ox carts behind him, loaded with salt. He showed a troubled expression. We don't have much extra food ourselves. Look, we just finished mining salt, and everyone's exhausted. We're counting on these supplies to get us back to the tribe. Fu stared eagerly, pleading persistently. Just a little would do. Even a few strips of dried meat or some wild vegetables. Just to tide us over until we return to our tribe. I promise we'll repay you double once we're back. After a moment's thought, he finally shook his head. It's really not convenient right now. How about this? Come with us back to our tribe. Once there, we'll treat you to good food and drink, and you can tell us all about the spring gathering. Fu's eyes lit up immediately. That sounds perfect. Thank you for your generosity, Chief. We'll follow you then. And so, the two groups set off together, heading slowly toward the Han tribe. The sky grew darker, the night descending like a vast black silk curtain. The Han tribe members lit their torches, and in an instant, the winding procession resembled a slithering serpent of fire, glowing brilliantly in the darkness. The nomad tribe members gazed at the bright torches, their faces full of wonder and envy. Fu couldn't resist moving closer to Yi, asking curiously, "Your torches are so bright. How do you make them? We usually travel in the dark and have suffered plenty because of it." He smiled, picking up a torch casually. He explained, "Making these torches isn't hard. Find a sturdy wooden stick, wrap one end thickly with cloth strips and dry grass, soak it in animal fat, and light it up." Fu nodded repeatedly as he listened. "That's a great method. I'll have our people make some just like it when we get back." As they chatted along the way, they soon arrived at the Han tribe without even realizing it. The nomad tribe members had just stepped into the tribe. He was stunned speechless by the scene before him. Tall, sturdy walls encircled the area, with rows of flags fluttering atop them. Inside the tribe, dwellings were arranged in an orderly fashion, and both people and livestock thrived, radiating vitality everywhere. He couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. The scale of this tribe is so vast, and the facilities are so well equipped. Truly, this is the most impressive tribe I've ever seen. You smiled faintly and instructed your tribespeople to arrange accommodations for the visitors. You also ordered hot, steaming meals to be served. Everyone sat together, eating large chunks of meat and drinking from big bowls, the atmosphere lively and harmonious. After 3 rounds of drinks, Fu set down his bowl and chopsticks, cleared his throat and spoke. "Chief, thank you for your hospitality. It's time for me to fulfill my promise. The spring gathering is set for half a month from now, at the confluence of the Great River to the east. At that time, 20 to 30 surrounding tribes will gather there. It'll be very lively." You nodded slightly, committing the details of the spring gathering to memory. "What are the customs for this spring gathering? The rules for trading and the events for the competitions. Please explain them in detail." Fu wiped his mouth and began to explain patiently. There are quite a few customs. For the gathering, each tribe must bring their most impressive token as an entry pass. Without it, you won't be allowed into the venue. Trading is mostly done through barter. Both parties negotiate a fair exchange based on value. The competition events include hunting contests and archery matches, as well as displays of craftsmanship. The winning tribe receives generous rewards and gains significant prestige. You listened with great interest, already calculating what your tribe should prepare. Summoning his courage, Fu tentatively asked, "Chief, your tribe is so prosperous. With all these herds of livestock, I was wondering if you could spare us a cow? In the future, we will definitely repay you, running errands and handling tasks for the tribe without fail." Upon hearing this, your expression immediately darkened. A cow is out of the question. The tribe's development depends on our livestock. Right now, we need both manpower and animals. If you're short on food, I can provide some provisions. If you want to trade, we can discuss other items. But a cow is not negotiable. Fu's face fell with disappointment, but he quickly forced a smile. "Then, Chief, what can we trade for?" You thought for a moment and said, "Our tribe has an abundance of tools and knowledge. If you need something, you can exchange it for equivalent goods. Or, if you have any rare items, we'd be happy to trade for those as well." Fu nodded repeatedly. "Understood. Understood." After the meal, everyone retired to rest. Lying in bed, Fu tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The more he thought about it, the more he realized the immense potential of the Han tribe. The matter of the cow still weighed heavily on his mind. After much deliberation, he got up and went to your dwelling, knocking gently on the door. "Chief, are you asleep? There's something I'd like to discuss with you further." You opened the door and, seeing it was Fu, frowned. "What is it at this late hour?" Fu spoke with sincerity. "Chief, I've been thinking it over. Although our nomadic tribe doesn't have much in terms of possessions, we excel at running errands and handling tasks. We're skilled at finding resources, connecting with other tribes, and doing all sorts of odd jobs. Could you please reconsider the matter of the cow? Just name your conditions. Whatever we can do, we'll give it our all." You crossed your arms and studied Fu with a scrutinizing gaze, thinking to yourself, "This nomadic tribe travels far and wide. They must have extensive connections and resources. If they could be of use to us, it would indeed be a good thing." After a moment of contemplation, you spoke slowly. "Since you're so persistent, I'll be straightforward. What our tribe needs most right now is clothing. The weather is warming up, and our population has grown. The clothes we have are far from enough. If you can help us find enough animal hides and hemp materials to make clothing, or if you know where to gather or trade for these materials, then we could consider giving you that cow." Fu's eyes lit up, and he thumped his chest confidently. "Chief, don't worry. Leave this matter to us. We travel among various tribes every day and are very familiar with the sources of animal hides and hemp materials in the surrounding areas. I'll definitely find satisfactory materials for you within 3 days at most." The corner of your mouth lifted, revealing a faint smile. "Good. I hope you won't go back on your word. If you succeed halfway, the ox will be taken away immediately. If you fail, don't ever mention this again." Shifu nodded repeatedly, then left joyfully. Watching his retreating figure, your heart swelled with anticipation. You knew deep down that this might be a pivotal opportunity for the Han tribe to step onto a larger stage. On the 3rd day, Fu returned to the Han tribe. He had discovered a place where many Juma plants grew, but the journey there was extremely long. Even for someone as fast as him, it would take a full day to reach. Yet, you simply smiled without a word, turned around, and led out a horned deer. Riding it would allow a round trip within a single day. Fu had seen this type of deer before but never imagined it could be tamed and obediently follow human commands. Seeing his hesitation, you patiently taught him how to control the deer's movement and how to make it stop. After just one ride, Fu fell in love with this miraculous means of transport and asked if he could have the deer added to the original trade deal. You firmly refused. "It's either the ox or the deer, you can't have both. The reward I'm offering is already generous enough." Fu didn't press further but secretly looked forward to future collaborations. At the break of dawn the next day, you and Yofu set out, each riding 2 deer. Before leaving, you instructed your tribesmen to clear wasteland along the northern bank of the artificial river, so that the gathered Juma could be planted immediately upon your return. Riding the large horned deer, the 2 of you headed northwest. The journey that would normally take a day was completed by the time the sun reached its zenith, arriving at the place Yufu had described. It was a slope blanketed in green, covered with numerous Juma plants, enough to span over 2,000 meters, with no other vegetation in sight. You immediately furrowed your brows. This guy is probably a sly one. This vast area is clearly cultivated by someone. If we're caught, we're in for a beating. Chieftain, isn't this the grass you were looking for? Yofu pointed at the expansive patches of Juma on the slope. It's the right grass, but these have an owner, don't they? Is there a tribe nearby? Well, there is a Bien tribe here, but they aren't very welcoming to outsiders, so we haven't come here much before. Damn it. This kid did it on purpose. He's setting me up. But since you were already here, turning back empty-handed wasn't an option. You decided to stealthily gather some plants and make a quick escape. With that thought, you took a large basket from the deer's back and began harvesting frantically. Seeing this, Yofu also grabbed his bone knife and started working. Just as you were harvesting enthusiastically, the sound of wooden sticks clattering suddenly echoed from all around. Your heart sank. Crap, we've been caught. Before you could react, dozens of people, at least 30 or 40 adult men, surrounded you from all directions. Without a second thought, you and Yofu scrambled onto the deer's backs and urged them to charge down the slope. But several hemp ropes were suddenly pulled taut from the crowd, blocking your escape. Immediately after, 2 large nets woven from hemp ropes were thrown over you, trapping you like captured pigs. You were carried up the slope, with the horned deer being led closely behind. Your heart turned cold. Caught red-handed stealing. How embarrassing. A quick glance revealed that the leader was actually a girl. She wore a triumphant smile, her long black hair flowing freely down her back, and a piece of hemp cloth wrapped around her waist as a skirt. Though strikingly beautiful, you were in no mood to appreciate her appearance. Turning my head, I glared at the person who was also being carried. Damn it, it's all your fault. Before long, you were carried back to the tribe's settlement. The chieftain of the Bien tribe also came before the two of you. To your surprise, their chieftain was actually a woman. She was wrapped in the same kind of mesh cloth as the girl, but it was a robe with a hood. Just then, the girl cheerfully approached you and said to the female chieftain, "Mother, I discovered this man as soon as he arrived at the horse field. You should reward him to me." The girl had never seen anyone riding a tall beast before, and your attire was also very striking. When she found you, her first thought was to keep you as her personal guard. The Bien tribe was a matriarchal clan-like society where women held the highest authority. Their chieftain was a woman in her 30s, and the girl before you was her daughter, Xiao Dai, who had just turned 12 and reached adulthood. Recently, they had also received news of the spring gathering and were thinking about what kind of man they should find. Unexpectedly, one had delivered himself to their doorstep. Walking up to you, she sized up the boy. He was indeed unique. You said he came riding a horned beast? Yes, both of them came riding horned beasts. Mother, please give him to me as my man. I don't want to go to the spring gathering. But he doesn't seem like an ordinary person, the chieftain remarked, her sharp eyes scanning you up and down, especially focusing on the bronze helmet on your head. She had never seen such a shiny, golden object before. Such a luxurious accessory was definitely not something an ordinary person could wear. She suspected he was either a tribal chieftain or the child of one. Forcibly keeping someone like this could cause trouble and even provoke conflict between two tribes. Then a male tribesman handed your bow, arrows, and spear to the chieftain. This was their custom. Taking your bronze spear, she noted its sharp, gleaming tip and thought to herself, if their tribe is fully equipped with weapons like this, we absolutely cannot keep him here. Next, she picked up your bow and studied it for a long time but couldn't figure out its purpose. Xiao Dai immediately took the bow from her mother's hands and plucked the bowstring, twanging it as if playing an instrument, seemingly thinking it was some kind of musical tool. You gritted your teeth in frustration. After all, releasing the bowstring without an arrow could damage the bow. The chieftain then pulled a feathered arrow from the quiver. Looking at the feathers attached to the arrow's end and the equally sharp bronze arrowhead, she was certain it was a weapon. However, she had no idea how such a small feather could be used. Although you couldn't understand the gibberish they were speaking, watching the mother and daughter study the items for so long without figuring them out, you could easily guess what they were discussing. Frustrated, you shouted, "Let me go, and I'll tell you how to use it." The chieftain couldn't understand your words either but knew you wanted to speak. She turned around, took a handful of horse grass from a large basket, and said to you, "Why did you steal our horse grass?" Just then, Yofu, who was trapped in another net, spoke up. "We didn't know these things belonged to you, but you'd better release us. Both of us are tribal chieftains." The people of the Bien tribe were stunned upon hearing this. "How do you know our tribe's language?" Glaring at the guy who had caused your capture, you were both annoyed and impressed that he could communicate with the other tribe. How did he know so many tribal languages? "I am Fu, the chieftain of the Yu tribe. Since we often trade with other tribes, we have to learn the languages of various tribes. The chieftain thought for a moment and recalled that a Yu tribe had indeed visited before. Thus, he confirmed Yu Fu's identity. But he still had some doubts about your identity. What about him? Why do you say he is also a chieftain? His tribe is even more formidable. Their population is no smaller than yours, and they possess many powerful weapons. It's best not to leave him behind, or your tribe will be finished. Chang, having heard all this, was already considering letting you go. If two tribes of similar size engage in battle, it's highly likely both will suffer heavy losses. That is not what he wishes to see. However, upon hearing this, Xiao Dai immediately protested. We're not afraid of him. What weapon could possibly be more powerful than the long spears? That short spear can't even be thrown far. If you keep lying, I'm going to keep him here. Yu Fu looked at Xiao Dai's unruly demeanor and merely chuckled without saying a word. In truth, he didn't know how to respond either, as he had no idea how that thing was used. He only knew it was incredibly powerful. Xiao Dai, seeing Yu Fu's disdainful smirk, couldn't stand it. You're lying. You're lying. I'm keeping him here. Unlike Xiao Dai's tantrum, Chang remained calm. Although he didn't recognize the bow and arrows, just from the sharp arrowhead, he could tell they were formidable. With good fortune, they wouldn't lack food, and without food shortages, their population would surely not be small. Plus, with the bronze vessel on your head, he was absolutely certain you were a leader of a major tribe. Chang pulled the fuming Xiao Dai aside. I can let you go, but you've destroyed our tribe's horse grass. We'll have much less this year. How do you plan to compensate me? Xiao Dai, hearing her mother was about to release them, grew frantic. Mother, you can't let them go. I want to keep him here as my man. Chang, as the tribe's chieftain, naturally understood the gravity of the situation and immediately refused. He is the chieftain of another tribe. We cannot keep him here. At this point, Yu Fu grew impatient. What exactly do you want as compensation? Give it to us quickly so we can leave. Chang thought for a moment, then pointed at your bow and arrows, the metal spear, and the several horned beasts, saying, We want to keep these weapons and the horned beasts. Yu Fu refused without a second thought. Impossible. That's not mine, and he won't give them to you either. You, seeing Chang point at your weapons and the horned beasts, asked Yu Fu in confusion, What does he want? Yu Fu explained. He says we destroyed their horse grass and want to keep the weapons and horned beasts as compensation. Hearing this, Yu exploded. This is nothing but a scam. I only cut the grass, I didn't uproot it. How did I destroy their horse grass? Even if compensation is due, it shouldn't require this much. But then you suddenly felt something was off. He just said we destroyed their hemp field. They only harvest the horse grass once a year. Yu Fu, not understanding what you meant, could only translate for you. The Han chieftain asks, Do you only harvest the horse grass once a year? Chang was taken aback by this question. Isn't horse grass harvested only once a year? Just by looking at Chang's expression, you knew they had no understanding of horse grass's growth habits. So, confidently, you told Fu to relay, I won't give up the weapons or the horned beasts, and I will continue to harvest the horse grass. But I can tell them that horse grass can be harvested 5 times a year. Upon hearing Fu's translation, the Bian tribe people were astonished. Horse grass can be harvested 5 times a year? Wouldn't that increase the yield 5-fold? This method was truly valuable. It's important to know that the Bian tribe cultivated this horsegrass not only for their own use but also traded the woven hemp cloth and ropes with other tribes, sometimes for food, sometimes for population. Thus, the yield of horsegrass essentially determined the Bian tribe's development. If what you said was true, then the Bian tribe would never lack horsegrass. This was too tempting for them. Chang's eyes lit up immediately, and he hurriedly waved his hands. Have your clansmen lower you down. Several men complied with the order. With a flurry of hands and feet, the 2 of you were freed from the net. You stood up and straightened your animal hide skirt, then pointed at Chang Yu and gestured toward your weapons, signaling for him to return them first. Though Tang hesitated slightly, the firm and icy determination in your eyes, carrying an air of undeniable authority, made him quickly instruct Xiao Dai to return your weapons. However, Xiao Dai had been against releasing you all along and, out of stubbornness, was unwilling to hand them over easily. She turned her head away with a huff and said, Fine. I'll give them back. but you have to teach me how to use the bow and arrow first. You nodded in agreement, took the longbow, and then drew an arrow from the quiver. Scanning the surroundings for a suitable target, you suddenly spotted a small wild boar trapped in a net hanging not far away, still alive. It was about 30 meters from you. Without much aim, you raised the bow, drew the string, and released the arrow. With a sharp whoosh, the bronze arrowhead easily pierced through the boar's hide and flesh, flying out the other side and embedding itself with a thud in a wooden post behind. The boar let out a pained cry, 2 thin streams of blood spurting from its sides, and after a few violent convulsions, it fell still. The Tian tribe members were stunned, their bodies trembling involuntarily. They hadn't expected the weapon to be so deadly. Thank goodness the chief agreed to let them go, they thought. Otherwise, if the Han tribe attacked, our tribe would be wiped out in minutes. Xiao Dai, however, showed no fear at the sight of the dead boar. Instead, she exclaimed in awe at the weapon's power. So that's how it's used. It's incredible. Chang was equally shocked. He hadn't imagined such a weapon could be so effective. The thought of what it could do to a human instead of a boar sent a chill down his spine, and he dared not dwell on it. And that was just one arrow. Your quiver still held dozens more, seemingly even more than the number of men in his tribe. Fear began to grip Chang. This was a terrifying weapon, and he knew he must avoid any conflict with the Han tribe. You glanced covertly at their faces, noting their shock and fear, and felt a surge of satisfaction. Let's see if they dare capture me like a wild boar again, you thought to yourself. Then you retrieved the arrow from the post, placed it back in the quiver, and turned to lead the group toward the hemp field, taking Zhao Lu along. Once everyone had gathered around, you calmly pointed to the hemp plants on the ground and taught them the proper harvesting method. Don't pull the hemp out by the roots. Just cut it where I showed you, and it will regrow quickly. Before the water freezes, you can harvest it this way at least 5 or 6 times. Yu Fu, standing nearby, naturally acted as your translator. The Bian tribe members were astonished. They had always uprooted the plants and had no idea such a technique existed. Chang asked in surprise, "How did you know this? Have you grown hemp before?" You casually lied. "I did when I was young." "Then why are you harvesting our hemp? To take it back and plant it?" "Yes, to weave cloth." Xiao Dai looked at you in amazement. "You know how to weave cloth?" "Of course, and I can weave better cloth than yours, wider and tighter." You glanced at their coarse hemp garments, which were full of holes like sieves, hardly covering anything private. "Can you teach us?" Chang didn't doubt you were lying. Your weapons had already proven your tribe's advanced skills. Even though you'd just been freed from the net, he couldn't help but scheme a little. "No, I only teach my own tribe's people. Unless you join my tribe. Joining another tribe is out of the question, especially a southern one." Chang had never considered it and refused outright. You didn't actually expect him to agree directly, you just wanted to pique his interest. With a casual shrug, you signaled it didn't matter, and then called Yofu to harvest the horse grass. Chang didn't say anything. After all, this had been agreed upon beforehand. Still, he had other ideas, hoping to trade goods with the Han tribe in the future. You glanced at him, then at the Bian tribe members behind him, and told him trade was possible, but you only needed children and men. 20 minutes later, 4 large baskets were filled. After loading the horse seedlings onto the deer's back, you prepared to leave. Just then, Xiao Dai, who had been standing to the side, suddenly grabbed the reins. "Can't you stay?" she pleaded. After hearing Yofu's translation, your face flushed, but you shook your head seriously. "I have my own tribe. I can't stay here." Tears welled up in Xiaodia's eyes as she pouted and asked sadly, "Then can you at least tell me your name?" You didn't answer. Instead, you nudged the deer with your legs, and it bolted forward. Then, pulling out an arrow, you shot it into the ground about 2 meters in front of Xiao Dai. She hurried over, pulled out the feathered arrow, and examined it carefully. Eventually, she noticed 2 square symbols carved into the wooden shaft near the fletching. One side read Han, and the other Chong Amu, the same totem as the one on her head. She showed the arrow to Chong. "Keep it safe. Don't damage it. Let's see if we can make weapons like this." Yofu and you galloped away side by side, finally arriving back at the Han tribe with about 3 hours of daylight left. This was the north bank of the artificial river, where members of both the Han and Yu tribes had cleared a small plot of farmland, roughly 5 acres in size. Using a shovel, you drew furrows in the ground and instructed your tribespeople to plant the horse seedlings directly into the soil, then water them lightly. The chieftain and the elder approached you. "What are we planting this for?" the elder asked. "For making clothes, things to wear on the body. Clothes made from this material are thin, perfect for summer wear." The tribespeople nodded in understanding. They had learned a new word, clothes. Anything worn on the body was called clothes. With the Yu tribe's task completed, Yofu came to claim his payment. Although there had been some unexpected twists, you kept your word, giving him the promised batch of horns as requested, along with an extra pottery pot and 10 pottery bowls. As for the incident where both of you were captured by the Bian tribe, neither of you brought it up. You were both tribal leaders after all, and it was too embarrassing. Early the next morning, Yofu and his tribespeople came to bid you farewell, agreeing to meet again later in Mengchun Valley. You watched as the Yu tribe's procession disappeared into the distance, your gaze distant. You too longed to venture out like the Yu tribe. Just then, the elder approached from behind and called out to you. "Chieftain, what should we do next?" Snapping out of your thoughts, you looked at the elder and remembered the rice seedlings you'd encountered earlier. 17 days had passed. It was time for transplanting. Without delay, you instructed the elder to gather all the able-bodied adults. First, you had the men dig open the irrigation channels, creating gaps to let water flow into the fields. Though the elder didn't fully understand what transplanting seedlings meant, he followed your orders. He knew trusting the chieftain was always right. Soon, the men, carrying bronze shovels, opened several gaps in each channel. Water from the artificial river gushed into the rice paddies. Meanwhile, you led the women in pulling up the rice seedlings, bundling them into handfuls, and setting them aside. The shepherd boy, as you'd instructed, used a horse ruler to measure and cut a pile of 40-centimeter sticks to help maintain row spacing during transplanting. After all the preparations were completed, everyone gathered around you to learn how to transplant rice seedlings. Using 2 fingers to pinch the roots of the seedlings, they inserted them directly into the soil. Then, using a small stick to measure the spacing, they planted the next one. Everyone expressed their understanding. However, a man from the Black Rat tribe raised a question. "Can this grass in our hands really be eaten?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone turned to look at him. Clearly, this was a question everyone wanted to ask, but no one had dared to bring it up before. They had all seen livestock farming and peanut cultivation, which produced familiar food, but this crop you were talking about was something none of them had ever seen. They all felt that spending so much time growing rice was hardly worth it. You didn't get angry, but patiently explained to everyone. This grass indeed cannot be eaten directly. What we eat are its seeds. As you spoke, you asked Shirtu to bring out the remaining 22 gene of rice seeds for everyone to see. "These are the seeds of rice," you said. "They're called rice grains. Once we remove the husk, what's left is the rice we eat. This rice is very hard, so it must be cooked in a pot before eating." Seeing that everyone still looked somewhat confused, you decided to return to the tribe immediately and use the remaining rice seeds to cook a pot of rice for everyone to taste. The elder and the rat shaman, being too old to bend down and transplant seedlings, also followed you back to the tribe to watch you cook. First, you found a relatively thick jar and used a wooden stick to pound the rice inside, hulling all the grains in no time. The rice grains turned into brown rice. Then, you placed the brown rice into a clay pot, washed it clean with water, and cooked it in the pot with a water-to-rice ratio of 2:1. The rat shaman, looking at the thin layer of rice covering the bottom of the pot, felt somewhat puzzled. "There's so little rice in here," he said. "Can it really fill anyone up?" Hearing this, you smiled and told him, "When rice is cooked with water, it expands. By the time it's done, there will be no water left in the pot, only soft, fluffy cooked rice." "The rice expands?" The elder and the rat shaman exclaimed in unison. It was the first time they had ever heard of food that could grow in size. Some of the children in the tribe also gathered around, watching curiously. Soon, a rich, fragrant aroma of rice filled the air, making the children swallow their saliva repeatedly. You, too, felt a surge of excitement. It was such a familiar scent. It had been so long since you last ate rice. While you were cooking, hundreds of tribesmen had already finished transplanting the seedlings. Now they all stood around the pot, breathing in the enticing aroma of rice. Soon, a pot of snow-white, fragrant cooked rice was laid out before everyone. You instructed each tribesperson to bring their own bowl and utensils and line up in an orderly fashion. Due to the limited quantity, each person could only take a small bite to taste. The first few in line were served quickly and couldn't wait to put the rice in their mouths. As they ate, they savored the flavor, exclaiming, "This rice is so fragrant. and after chewing a few times, there's a hint of sweetness. It's absolutely delicious. Those who hadn't eaten yet grew even more anxious upon hearing this and urged the ones in front to hurry up. In no time, the entire tribe was filled with the sound of people scraping their bowls clean. Accustomed to a meat-based diet, they found this soft, sticky, and sweet food both novel and delightful. Now, not a single person in the tribe doubted you anymore. On the contrary, because you had introduced rice and water, your prestige among the tribespeople rose even higher. After finishing these tasks, you began assigning work to everyone again. The men were sent to fell trees, catch chickens, hunt, and smelt copper, while also making tools and doing carpentry. The women were tasked with brick-making, firing kills, fishing, herding livestock, and refining salt from the mines. The method for refining salt was similar to the one used for processing cinnabar. First, remove impurities from the mineral salt, then boil it in clean water, and finally, evaporate it to form crystals. The resulting white salt was not only for the tribe's own use but could also be traded with others. You placed great importance on the matter of chunhui. We need to prepare more riverbank pottery. These are essential items for every tribe, so there's no worry about them not selling. Another thing to prepare is a large cart. It will be crucial for transporting so many goods such a long distance. I immediately called for Mutin and inquired about the progress of the wooden cart. Without wasting words, Mutin directly brought over a dozen members of the carpentry team and pushed the four-wheeled cart right in front of me. When I saw it, I was instantly stunned. I hadn't expected the honest Mutin to have such skill. Originally, I had only asked him to make a two-wheeled flat cart, but what now stood before me already had the makings of a carriage. At the back was a large cargo compartment. Though it lacked a canopy, we could easily drape an animal hide tent over it later. It would be almost as good as a proper carriage. Moreover, at the front of the cart, there was a flat platform where two people could sit. Later, we could hitch two oxen for power, and the driver could sit on the seat to steer. I praised Mutin lavishly and offered a few suggestions for improvement. Mutin was delighted and immediately set to work again with his carpentry team. Under my direction and coordination, the first ox cart in human history was completed in just 3 days. Now, this cart was exactly as I had envisioned. Not only beautiful and luxurious but also highly practical. Its fuel consumption? Just a bundle of grass per 100 kilometers. In the blink of an eye, the first month of spring was about to end. The past month had been remarkably fruitful. The Han tribe had cultivated fields, mined for stone, fought a battle, subdued the Black Rat tribe, and successfully introduced horse breeds from the border tribe. Life for the tribespeople was steadily improving. The only shortcoming was that the city I had designed was still far from completion. It required too much labor. The Han tribe, even at full count, only had just over 350 people. Now it was time to take the pottery and white salt to the spring gathering and make some deals. For easier transport, I had Casey quickly produce a batch of small, flat-bottomed, wide-mouthed pottery jars with wooden lids that could be stacked together to save space. We loaded them directly into large wooden barrels, tying the lids securely with ropes. I kept directing the tribespeople as they loaded the cart. There were still 6 days until the spring gathering began, so to avoid rushing, I decided to set off early. I then called Dashu over and instructed him to manage the tribe in my absence, emphasizing the need to protect our people and the young rice shoots. Feeling the weight of my trust, Dashu thumped his chest resoundingly, vowing to protect every member of the tribe. Then I turned to Shuda, handing him a pre-prepared headpiece, and said, "While I'm away, you'll be responsible for leading the hunting team and training the newly joined tribespeople in archery and spear practice every day." Shuda, who had felt a bit slighted seeing Dashu entrusted with such responsibility, immediately forgot his discontent upon receiving a headpiece just like Dashu's. He couldn't stop admiring the ornament in his hands. Finally, I instructed the elders and the rat shaman to check the rice paddies daily, ensuring the fields remained filled with water, at least deep enough to cover a palm. Though both were old and frail, they were eager to contribute to the tribe. Now that they had their own tasks, they happily agreed at once. Once everything was arranged, I immediately called the team to set off. For this trip to the spring gathering, I only brought a few adult men. The recovered Dali and Duer, along with Shuya, Shirtu, Yumao, and Shuzhuang, 6 in total. Additionally, there were Hozi, Dazue, Damao, Irma, and 20 other newly adult boys. Shuzhuang was specifically tasked with driving the ox cart. Yu and 5 other seasoned warriors rode on Bigfoot deer, while the remaining 20 youths shared 10 Bigfoot deer. A luxurious riding party of 27 people set off towards the southwest, heading for Mongolia. The journey was through western forests and grassy hills, and the group progressed smoothly. By evening, everyone found a clearing to camp. They gathered around the campsite, lighting several bonfires. You arranged for the clansmen to take turns keeping watch and prepared to rest. But you had barely dozed off when Beast Tooth called out, "Chief, wake up! Another group has caught up behind us." They seemed to be heading to the spring gathering too. Hearing this, you rubbed your eyes, sat up, and looked towards the few approaching torches in the distance. As they drew closer, you realized the leader of this group was Chong, wrapped entirely in hemp cloth. It turned out the weaving tribe, led by Chong, had more people than yours. 10 adult men, 20 girls, 20 boys, and himself, 51 in total. They carried their own goods: hemp ropes, hemp nets, hemp cloth, and even large bone clubs. Meanwhile, little Butterfly was throwing a tantrum. "Mom, I'm so thirsty. There's no water along the way. I don't want to go to Mongolia to find a man anymore." Her mother, Chong, knew exactly what her daughter was thinking and immediately called her out. "Don't think I don't know what's on your mind. That person is the chief of another tribe. He won't come to our tribe. Just give it up." Just then, an adult man hurried over to the mother and daughter. "Chief, there's a tribal group camping ahead. Should we approach them?" Hearing that there were people ahead, little Butterfly immediately tugged at Chang's arm, whining, "Mom, let's go take a look. I'm so thirsty." Chong glanced around at the clansmen. They hadn't had water for half a day and were all desperately thirsty. She nodded in agreement. Little Butterfly hurried ahead and soon spotted the distinctive hairstyles of the Han tribe. She immediately brightened up. "Mom, look, it's the Han tribe. Let's go ask them for some water." Chong shot her a glance, muttering under her breath, "Their tribe is even farther than ours. Who knows if they have any water left?" By then, you had also approached, recognizing the newcomers as Chong and Little Butterfly. "Chief of the Han, do you still have water? We've run out. Could we trade for some water?" Chong gestured as she spoke to you. You frowned immediately. Trading for water? No way. Their goods were worthless. Aside from their people, you had no interest in any of it. You waved your hand dismissively, indicating no trade was needed, and motioned for them to follow you. You led them to the back of the 4-ox cart, climbed onto it, and retrieved a large pottery bowl. The tribespeople were stunned. "Holy crap! What is that? How did they bring a house here? And is that chief holding a stone basin? They have a whole house full of stone basins? But what good are basins without water?" Then they watched as you went to the back of the ox cart, tipped over a round wooden barrel, and pulled a wooden plug from the lid. Instantly, clear water gushed out. A youth gaped in astonishment. "Is that for storing water? It's so big. You could fit a person inside." Ignoring him, you handed the bowl filled with water to Chong. "Drink up. No need to trade." Chong placed her right hand over her chest, bowed slightly in gratitude, and then she and Little Butterfly took turns drinking the entire bowl dry. Seeing the rest of the group still waiting thirstily, you handed the bowl to Big Mouth, instructing him to distribute water to everyone. "Chief of the Han, you're heading to the spring gathering too, right? Would our two tribes be able to travel together?" You knew she just wanted to tag along for a share of the water. After a moment's thought, there was no refusal. If I guess correctly, those boys were probably meant for trade as well. Soon after, the Bien tribe people set up camp next to the Han tribe. Some of them were sleeping, while others were curiously watching the Han tribe people and their various belongings, whispering softly among themselves. At the break of dawn the next day, the aroma of meat filled the campsite. The Han tribe's breakfast was ready: rabbits and groundhogs that the hunters had killed with bows and arrows the day before. The Bien tribe was also roused by the enticing smell, and they took out their smoked jerky to roast over the fire. You sat by the fire as well, skewering a rabbit liver on a stick to roast, sprinkling salt and chili flakes as you turned it. In an instant, a unique aroma drew Xiao Dai over. He stared intently at you, handling the food on the stick, swallowing helplessly. Once it was fully cooked, you sliced off half with a small knife and handed it to him. After all, he had waited quite a while just to get a taste. Xiao Dai grinned as he accepted the roasted rabbit liver, taking a big bite right away. After just a few chews, his face turned bright red, mouth agape as he frantically fanned himself with his hand. But he still couldn't bring himself to spit it out. His expression made you want to laugh, but you decided not to tease him further. You handed him a bowl of cool water, and after gulping down 2 mouthfuls, he felt a bit better. What is this flavor? It's uncomfortable, but I really like it. You told him it was chili, and that spicy taste was called la. Xiao Dai then pointed to another pouch filled with white granules. And this white stuff? You pinched a bit of salt and placed it in Xiao Dai's hand. This is white salt. It's salty. Eating it gives you strength, lets you walk farther, work harder, and keeps your back from tiring too easily. Xiao Dai licked it, and his eyes widened instantly. Excited, he immediately ran back to show his AMU. He knew this was something his tribe desperately needed. Chang had just been about to ask what it was when Xiao Dai shoved that bit of white salt into his mouth. The intensely salty taste made him frown, but he forced himself to swallow it. He quickly grabbed Xiao Dai and asked where it came from. The Han tribe leader gave it to me. He has plenty more. With that, Xiao Dai pulled Chang over to you. No one noticed the faint, mischievous smile at the corner of your lips just then. Hee, the fish has taken the bait. Then, generously, you handed over that small pouch made of snakeskin, filled with white salt. Chang took the salt pouch, dipped his finger in, and put a bit in his mouth. He smacked his lips and savored the taste, seeming to thoroughly enjoy the pure saltiness. Excited, he asked you, Han tribe leader, where did this white salt come from? Can you trade some to us? We made it ourselves in our tribe. A bowl of white salt for 1 man. Chang thought for a moment. Those boys were originally meant to be traded to other tribes anyway, so he readily agreed. But he wanted to trade 20 boys at once and hoped you would give a bit more salt. You pretended to hesitate but eventually nodded. You led him to the back of the ox cart. When you lifted the animal hide covering, the Bien tribespeople were stunned. Besides stacks of pottery, there were several huge wooden barrels on the cart. So many items, and all of them containers. Any one of them could easily be traded for at least 1 person. The Han tribe was incredibly wealthy. However, when you deliberately opened the lids of a few barrels, they could no longer stay calm. My goodness! These huge barrels are all filled with white salt. Chang suddenly felt it was a bit unreal. After all, salt was priceless and hard to come by, let alone such pure, snow-white salt. And the Han tribe had so much of it. At that moment, his resolve not to join any other tribe began to waver. If it was a tribe as rich as the Han tribe, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to consider joining after all. You took a full bite from the stone barrel, appearing to weigh a solid 3 caddies. No more than this for 1 person. You find your own bags to carry them. Tang snapped out of his surprise and quickly had Xiao Dai fetch a few animal hide bags from the tribesmen. In the end, they filled 2 full bags, which were carried by the 2 strongest adult men of the Bien tribe. The 20 youths from the Bien tribe had now become part of the Han tribe. The group, originally 27 people, had grown to 47. That this made you quite pleased. Making such a profit even before the spring gathering was a promising start. Soon, the group set off again, though their pace slowed slightly. Apart from Changhe and Xiao Dai, who rode on the ox cart, everyone else in the Bien tribe was on foot. The newly joined 20 youths took turns walking alongside the 20 youths you had brought with you. After traveling southwest for 2 more days, you encountered other groups. Among them was Yufu, also riding a large-footed deer, with his 2 3- or 4-year-old sons in his arms and his tribesmen following him. Traveling with them was another tribe, the Snake tribe. Their group consisted of 31 people, including 10 seasoned warriors, along with 10 youths and 10 young women. Their leader was an old man with white hair and a white beard, the most peculiar figure you had seen since arriving in this world. The old man sat comfortably on a sedan chair carried by 4 people, leisurely playing with a large green snake. Yufu was delighted to see you and came over to greet you. Han Sholing, I didn't expect you to arrive so early. Let me introduce you, this is Shu'u of the Snake tribe. The snake on him is their tribe's snake god. Their snake god is truly miraculous. No matter what venomous snake bites you, as long as the snake god bites you in return, you'll be cured. When I was a child, I was bitten by a venomous snake, and my father took me to the snake god for treatment. Yofu proudly boasted to you, as if he had a close relationship with the snake tribe. As for this so-called snake god, you certainly didn't believe in it. However, the ability to cure snake venom might be real. In your previous life, you had heard of ancient mountain healers who raised medicinal snakes, often highly venomous ones, trained from a young age to treat snake bites. Faced with such a healer from this primitive era, you still owed him due respect. Placing your right hand over your chest, you nodded slightly toward Shu'u, who returned the gesture. Yet, the old man's gaze remained fixed on your ox cart, He had never seen such an advanced mode of transport. Compared to his sedan chair, it was like the difference between an Audi and an Alto. With that, the 4 groups set off together, totaling nearly 160 people. Youfu watched the stone trees behind you with great envy. If only his Yu tribe could travel like that. So he asked you again, Han Sholing, do you have any more tasks for us? I'd like to get some more horned beasts. To be honest, you really didn't want to trade any more livestock, as the Han tribe didn't have much to spare. You promptly told him that, for now, you wouldn't be trading horned beasts. Any future tasks would have to be rewarded with something else. Hearing this, Youfu was disappointed, but the clever man soon came up with another idea. What he wanted was merely a means of transport. Why did it have to be horned beasts? An ox cart would be just as good. Han Sholing, could you give me one of those ox carts? I'll do anything for you. This guy was purely dreaming. The ox cart was so labor-intensive to make. How could it possibly be used for trade? However, a small pushcart might be feasible, but it would require 50 adults in exchange. If he wanted an ox, he'd have to add another 10 people. You directly shared your thoughts with him. Your tribe probably doesn't have that many people either. But I believe you definitely have a way to get them. The man spoke with confidence, appearing very self-assured. That's right, I can get you at least 100 people. But I want those large carts with 4 wheels, and 2 oxen to pull them. You didn't immediately refute him, but were rather curious about where his confidence came from. A chieftain of a small tribe of about 50 people, claiming he could bring over 100 adults. You didn't want them if they were forcibly captured. Of course not. The people I find are all wild folk, wild folk. Could there be even more? Seeing your disbelieving expression, Youfu explained, those so-called wild folk are actually people wandering alone. Most of them are disabled individuals abandoned by their tribes, or those who made mistakes and were expelled from their tribes. After thinking for a moment, you decisively agreed. Your tribe had so many princesses, plenty of places to settle them. The disabled can follow the lame, the mischievous can do hard labor. You weren't afraid of them being disobedient, but you set a time limit. You demanded that he must deliver the people to the Han tribe before the second full moon. Hofu readily agreed. Then, without even attending the spring gathering, he immediately headed back with his tribesmen. After all, there were too many places to cover. The entire group now numbered over 100 people, continuing their journey southwest. By evening, as they passed a gentle slope and hill, you and Doer, who were scouting ahead, suddenly spotted 3 adult terror birds and their nest. You immediately sent Doer back to fetch more people while you stayed behind to keep watch. The 3 terror birds were near their nest, sharing something they were eating. They seemed to be enjoying their meal, completely uninterested in you. After a while, the main group caught up. Besides the Han tribe members, there were also 6 warriors from the Snake and Border tribes. This made you twitch at the corner of your mouth. There were only 3 prey in total, why bring so many people? Chief, I told them, but the 2 tribes insisted on joining. They said all the prey along the way had been hunted by us, and they were almost out of food. Tell them they can have one of the 3 terror birds, but the eggs belong to us. Have them gather firewood. Our own people only need 16 steps, the rest should protect the ox carts. Subsequently, Doer communicated with the 2 tribes, and they all gathered at the top of the small hill to observe. The next moment you shouted and charged ahead first. The remaining 15 riders split into 2 columns, closely following behind you. The 3 terror birds, which were sharing their prey, froze for a moment. They had never seen such a formation before, and they stretched their necks, cawing strangely, trying to drive the group away. But you were heading straight for them. How could you return empty-handed? You immediately ordered your tribesmen to block the terror birds' escape routes. Seeing that these people weren't scared off but were charging fiercely toward them, the terror birds realized there was nowhere to run. They could only charge head-on toward you. As the distance closed, you leaned forward slightly, your spear pointing straight ahead. At the moment of collision with the terror bird, your spear pierced its chest. The powerful momentum drove the spearhead straight through. You pulled on the reins, guiding your mount to brush past the terror bird. In the moment you passed each other, you pulled out the spear that was exposed from the bird's back. With just one charge, the terror bird fell dead on the spot. The other 2 were quickly taken down as well. One of them was stabbed in the neck and back by Mao and Dezue working together, dying instantly. The fiercest one, when it encountered Shoya in a confrontation, tried to peck at him with its beak. But Shoya slightly raised the tip of his spear, and it went straight into its mouth. The deer was utterly, irreversibly dead. At the sight before her, Xiaodai bounced excitedly in the oxcart's cargo bed, calling out for her mother. The Han tribe's chief is so amazing. Xianxia couldn't help but marvel inwardly. The Han tribe's strength isn't just in their chief. They're not only wealthy but also have powerful warriors. With a tribe like this, we must cling tightly to their coattails. After a moment's thought, he asked his daughter, Xiaodai, do you like the Han tribe's chief? Would you be willing to go with him? Xiaodai was first amused by the question, then quickly nodded. But then she remembered, women in our tribe have always only taken in husbands, never married out. Though she liked him, she had never considered marrying into the Han tribe, nor could she bear to leave her mother. Xianxia sighed in resignation. The other party was a chief. There was no chance he would join their tribe. He could only return home and think it over carefully before deciding. When the group managed to haul back 3 terror birds, everyone agreed to set up camp for the night right there. The feathers of all 3 birds went to the Han tribe while the meat was divided among the rest. As everyone gathered around the bonfire to roast and eat, Xiaodai kept stealing glances at you, making you, a staunchly straightforward man, thoroughly uncomfortable. You had no choice but to step away from the campsite for some fresh air. The night breeze was gentle, and the clear sky was dotted with stars, indescribably pleasant. You turned to gaze southwest toward Meng Valley. Not far ahead stood a large, low mountain, its ridge faintly visible. There seemed to be countless fireflies glowing over there. Just then, Snake Shack approached and stood beside you, muttering to himself as he followed your gaze. Meng Valley is a beautiful place. There are glowing insects, glowing plants, and even the lake shines at night. It's a perfect spot for young couples in love. You didn't understand a word of his rambling, but the faint, sibilant hissing from his body was unmistakable. I need to get away from this strange old man. And fast. After all, that's a highly venomous snake. Early the next morning, the team set off again. Led by Snake Shack, they pressed on and finally arrived at the burial site in Meng Valley around 2 p.m. Meng Valley was a basin with a freshwater lake spanning 3,000 to 4,000 acres at its center, spouting water intermittently. The surroundings were carpeted in blooming flowers, and butterflies as large as palms fluttered through the air in dancing flocks. The most common trees in the valley were a type of willow you had never seen before. Their branches were white, and their leaves a pale pink. Countless branches swayed in the wind like a maiden's flowing hair, stirring the budding hearts of countless youths. The young women, captivated by the scenery, couldn't resist playing among the flowers, chasing vibrant butterflies and weaving beautiful garlands. The smitten young men watched, slack-jawed and mesmerized, standing there like a flock of dumbstruck geese. You went over and kicked one on the backside. What are you staring at? Never seen a woman before? Hurry up and unload the goods. With these fine items, are you worried about finding pretty girls? The boys grinned foolishly, scratching the backs of their heads, and began clearing the campsite. They tethered all the mounts to the willow trees nearby. The lush grass here would keep them happily fed for days. A dozen people worked together to haul over a large stone slab, arranging various pottery and white salt on it. The Bien tribe set up camp next to the Han tribe, slinging nets between 2 trees as hammocks. They also laid out linen cloth, straw sandals, and ropes, setting up a small stall. The Snake tribe camped on the other side of the Han tribe. Their main goods were snakeskins and medicinal herbs. It seemed this tribe specialized in healing. Throughout the afternoon, more tribes continued to arrive one after another. The arrival of these tribes opened the eyes of the young woman, who had seen few humans since coming to this world. There was the Zong tribe, clad entirely in leaf outfits. Their limbs were robust, adept at climbing, especially when swinging among vines. They could go almost an entire day without touching the ground. Then came the Zhu tribe, bringing raisins and brown sugar. They had mastered the art of drying grapes and even pressing grape juice to refine brown sugar. The Ao tribe, carrying massive turtle shells on their backs, looked just like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the Cha tribe, each member holding a 3-pronged wooden spear. Their specialty was spearing territory. There was also the Kuan tribe, covered head to toe in pheasant feathers. But they weren't skilled in singing or dancing. They excelled at catching wild fowl. More tribes gradually arrived, and by the time the sun set behind the western hills, there were around 20 different tribes with nearly 1,000 people in total. The moment the last rays of the sunset vanished, all the young people in the valley gasped in unison, letting out cries of amazement. Instantly, the entire valley lit up as if by magic, enchanting and dreamlike. The lake in the valley glowed with a deep blue light, illuminating the water with crystal clarity. Countless flowers bloomed with vibrant fluorescent colors. The tall white weeping willows shone even more brilliantly than in daylight, swaying like strands of LED lights in the wind. Even the butterflies, which had seemed merely colorful by day, now sparkled like fireflies, their dazzling spots both beautiful and strangely alluring. By the lakeshore, all the young men and women stood frozen, mesmerized by this fantastical scene. The calmest were the elders who had visited many times before. They began calling out to their tribes, preparing for the events of this year's spring gathering. The spring gathering resembled a market or temple fair. Each tribe displayed their specialties, and as people browsed, they could propose trades for items their tribe needed. If a girl took a liking to a young man, she would tie a strand of her hair to his weapon. If the boy agreed, he would bring a gift to her tribe's leader to propose marriage, and then he could take the girl with him. If a boy fancied a girl, he had to catch a fluorescent butterfly in the valley and present it to her. If she accepted, he would likewise bring a gift to her tribe's leader to propose. If two young men set their sights on the same girl, they would duel for the right to court her. Weapons were forbidden, and as long as no serious injuries occurred, the victor could take the girl with him. These rules were explained to you by Chang of the Bien tribe, leaving you, the chieftain, somewhat embarrassed. You coughed a few times to mask your discomfort, then shouted to your tribespeople, "What are you all standing around for? Go catch some butterflies." In the next moment, 40 young men swarmed toward the butterflies. Other tribes weren't idle either. Some began wandering aimlessly, others tried to flirt with girls, and some started trading. But you were busy cooking. The Kong bird meat from yesterday hadn't been finished. You cut it into small pieces, skewered them on branches, and grilled them over the fire, rotating the skewers and sprinkling salt and chili powder as they cooked. Shirtu caught several fish in the shallow waters by the lake, cleaned them, and set up a stone slab nearby to pan-fry them. Xianxia built 2 stone stoves, using lake water to simmer 2 pots of fish soup. Soon, the aroma of the meat drew girls from all around. They gathered to watch the Han tribe's novel way of eating and their distinctive attire. The men of the Han tribe tied up their hair, adorned with gleaming golden ornaments. Everyone looked clean and spirited. Some people were curiously examining the Han tribe's goods. They had never seen so many failures before. The boys chasing butterflies suddenly realized something was off. "We don't need to catch butterflies anymore," one exclaimed. "Those girls have already run over to our tribe on their own." And so, a group of energetic young men noisily rushed back. What attracted these girls wasn't just the Han tribe's delicious food. The ox-drawn cart, which looked like a small house, was enough to catch their attention. Not to mention, over a dozen deer and cattle were tied to the willow trees nearby. Think about it, if they could raise so many animals without eating them, it meant their tribe was undoubtedly powerful and had no shortage of food. Who wouldn't want to marry into such a tribe? The girls stood in small groups, watching the boys who had just returned from chasing butterflies. They sized up their looks, physiques, and weapons. One girl from the Cha tribe, after looking around, stopped beside Big Mouth. She cut off a lock of her long hair and tied it to his fur. Big Mouth stood there, grinning foolishly. A friend nudged him from behind, and in a sudden move, he pulled the girl into his arms, then froze, his face flushed red. The girl didn't seem shy at all. She kissed Big Mouth's cheek and quickly ran back to her tribe's stall. You witnessed the entire scene and knew that the spring gathering was going well for Big Mouth. He stood there frozen, unsure of what to do. Mao, standing nearby, grew anxious and urged, "What are you waiting for? Go propose." Only then did Big Mouth snap out of it, but he grew worried. He hadn't prepared any gifts. Mao, quick-witted, immediately suggested, "Go ask the chief. Let him figure it out." Big Mouth thought it made sense and rushed to your side to ask for your opinion. Seeing his anxious expression, you teased him, handing him a small pottery bowl filled halfway with white salt. "Take this. I guarantee you'll bring the girl home." Big Mouth's face lit up with joy. Happily holding the half bowl of salt, he eagerly ran to the Cha tribe's stall. He politely placed one hand on his chest, bowed slightly, and respectfully greeted the Cha tribe's chief. Then, he presented the half bowl of salt. The chief first examined the pottery bowl, thinking, "A container? Small, but it shows sincerity." But when he saw the white grains inside, he froze. He had no idea what it was. He took the bowl, sniffed it, and found it odorless. Pointing at the contents, he asked, "What is this? What's it for?" Though Big Mouth didn't understand the words, he could see the chief's confusion. He pointed at the bowl and said one word, "Salt." Then he dipped his finger in it and tasted it. The chief followed suit, pinching a bit and putting it in his mouth. The next moment, the distinct salty flavor exploded on his tongue. The chief nearly choked, his eyes widening in shock, but he forced himself to swallow the salt. Immediately, he asked urgently, "How much more of this does your tribe have? Will you trade?" Big Mouth was utterly confused, not understanding the situation. Seeing the chief's tense and eager expression, he thought the chief was dissatisfied. Tentatively, he pointed at the girl. The chief laughed, finally remembering why Big Mouth was there. He nodded firmly and brought the girl over to Big Mouth. Big Mouth, holding the girl's hand, grinned happily. Then, along with a few friends, he led her back. The chief turned and handed the half bowl of salt to one of his warriors, instructing him sternly, "Keep this safe at all costs." Then, he followed Big Mouth to the Han tribe stall. At the front of the Han tribe stall, rows of pottery were neatly arranged, along with a pot full of white salt. The chief of the Shiburo tribe didn't speak immediately but stood in the crowd, carefully observing the Han tribe while thinking to himself, "This tribe doesn't seem to have come here before." However, as he scanned the area, he spotted two familiar figures. One was Du-Er, with a scar on his face, and the other was Xianxia, who wore two saber-toothed tiger teeth around his neck. Their appearances were simply too memorable. But why was their chief so young? Among the crowd were also chiefs from several other tribes, stopping to watch. For instance, the Sling tribe, known for making slingshots from animal tendons, usually cooked soup not in a pot but by using animal hide. They would shape the hide into a pouch, fill it with water and food, and then drop scorching hot stones into it to cook the contents. A very primitive method. The chief of the Sling tribe had been drawn in by that pot of fish soup. He had taken a liking to the pot that could be used directly for cooking. Then there was the Pig tribe, which stir-fried brown sugar with grape juice. They, too, needed containers that could be heated directly. Additionally, there was the Bu tribe, skilled in identifying mushrooms. The Ao tribe, who carried turtle shells on their backs and loved using large turtle shells as shields. The Xue tribe, experts in digging and tunneling. The Ya tribe, whose warriors all wore jade earrings, and the Fei tribe, who were exceptionally skilled with slingshots. The chiefs of these tribes had all been attracted purely by the Han tribe's ox cart and that wagon. The remaining chiefs from tribes like the Bear tribe, Tiger tribe, Lian tribe, Hua tribe, Zong tribe, and Jingji tribe paid no attention and were still tending to their own stalls. However, some of their tribesmen had gathered around, watching as the cooks sprinkled a bit of that white sand onto the food. Curiosity got the better of them because, when the sand was sprinkled on the fried fish and roasted meat, it quickly dissolved, making them even more intrigued. They began discussing what it could be. After watching for a while, someone finally couldn't hold back. Yasho, who wore two beast tooth earrings, pointed at the pot of white salt and asked, "What is this? Is it edible?" You smiled, took a skewer of already cooked roasted meat, handed it to him, and then pointed at the pottery pot, saying the words white salt. Yasho took the meat, repeating the term white salt in Mandarin, and took a bite. The spiciness, saltiness, and the aroma of the roasted meat instantly won over his taste buds. He couldn't help but exclaim, "This meat is really fragrant." But then he felt something was off, so he took another bite, carefully savoring it in his mouth. You pinched a bit of white salt and placed it in his hand, signaling for him to taste it. Then you grabbed a handful and distributed it to the surrounding chiefs for them to try as well. Xianxia immediately put the salt into his mouth, frowning as he carefully savored the salty flavor. Seeing that Xianxia had eaten the white salt and seemed fine, the other chiefs followed suit and tried it. The moment the salt entered their mouths, a pure salty flavor burst forth. The chiefs were momentarily stunned. They had all tasted salty things before, but such pure white salt was a first for them. Unable to resist, a few chiefs swallowed hard and then asked in unison, "How do we trade for this white salt?" Seeing that the goal had been achieved, you stopped beating around the bush. Picking up a small pottery bowl, you filled it to the brim with white salt and indicated that this much white salt could be exchanged for one boy. The chiefs were taken aback, seemingly thinking the price was a bit high. But after giving it some thought, they realized, who knows how the Han tribe managed to produce such fine white salt? What if it's extremely difficult to make? Then it's understandable to exchange for a man as well. Chief Fong still wanted to haggle with you. He picked up a large clay bowl from the side, filled it to the brim with rock salt, and gestured that he wanted to exchange this much for one boy. You took the large clay bowl, poured all the salt into a smaller clay bowl, piling it up into a peak. "This much for one boy, no more," you said. You had already given more than the original amount, which made Chief Fong feel honored. Staring at the pile of white salt, he thought to himself that he must buy more. His tribe had over 200 people, and this time alone, he had brought 17 boys. So, gritting his teeth, he stretched out both hands, saying, "I want to exchange 10 people for the white salt." You nodded and told him to bring his own bags, as you had nothing to pack it in. Chief Fong turned and whispered something to a warrior beside him. The warrior quickly ran off and soon returned with 10 boys wearing beast tooth earrings and 2 python skin bags. You personally filled the bags with the white salt, scoop by scoop. One by one, the 10 boys stepped behind you. Seeing the salt in the pot nearly gone, the chiefs of the other tribes around grew restless and crowded forward, eager to trade first. Some exchanged 20 people, some 10, and even the smaller tribes traded 5 people. The scene before you made your heart leap with joy. "Ha! We've struck it rich, we've struck it rich." But you didn't lose your composure. Turning to Beast Tooth beside you, you whispered a few instructions. Beast Tooth nodded, turned to relay the message to a few veteran warriors, and then brought 2 people to carry 2 solemn, large barrels. Strong Arm led 10 Han tribe youths, armed with bronze spears, to stand guard around you and the stall. Boar took another 10 to protect the ox carts and livestock. Feather, Stone, and Stump were tasked with receiving the new tribe members, immediately marking them with hemp rope spells to distinguish them from other tribes. Watching the white salt at the stall being emptied by the earlier tribes, the leaders of the other tribes grew anxious, urging their people to hurry. But in the blink of an eye, they saw someone bring 2 more large, round wooden barrels. The number of guards armed with spears around also increased. You rolled the half-full barrel of white salt to the front of the stall, broke the wooden seal on top with a mallet, and showed them the remaining half-barrel of salt. The surrounding chiefs stared at the smooth, round wooden barrel in astonishment. It was the first time they had seen such a large, exquisitely crafted object, complete with a lid that could be locked. "This thing is so advanced," they thought. When they saw you pour another bowl of white salt from the large barrel, they finally relaxed. One by one, the boys had their hair tied and stood behind you. Your half-barrel of salt was soon empty, so you opened another full barrel to continue trading. More and more people gathered, many rushing to the Han tribe's stall, including chiefs who hadn't come earlier. For a time, the Han tribe stall became the center of attention at the entire spring gathering. Even some girls who had originally intended to flirt with young men crowded around. The Han tribe had the most men, but soon an unusual situation arose. Chief Fire, bare-chested with a flame totem scarred onto his chest by burns, approached you. He first scrutinized the Han tribe's people, then their goods, and finally offered 30 boys in exchange for white salt. 30 boys. That was all the boys the Fire tribe had brought this time. The remaining 10 in their tribe were all adult warriors. You thought to yourself, you've got quite a few people. You're really willing to part with them. However, they never refused anyone who came. Immediately, they brought out the same amount of white salt as others and exchanged it with the Fire tribe. This continued until no one could offer any more people, and only then did the trading come to an end. A total of 18 tribes attended the spring gathering. The other 17 tribes all conducted trades with the Han tribe. On average, each tribe contributed over 10 people. Adding to that the 20 people from the Bien tribe earlier, the Han tribe's population had reached a staggering 215. The cost? Merely a few hundred jin of salt. This was an absolute win. However, due to the Han tribe's frenzied purchasing of people, many girls found themselves with no options left in other tribes and had no choice but to come to the Han tribe to select men. Especially before the trading began, some young men and women had already completed their mate selection, only to be traded to the Han tribe afterward. Those girls who had found their partners had no choice but to follow their men and join the Han tribe. At this point, some tribal leaders were unwilling to accept this. The Han tribe was gaining too much advantage. A bowl of white salt not only exchanged for a boy but sometimes even took away 1 or 2 of their girls. This was a huge loss. So they all demanded compensation. You weren't stingy either. Based on their needs, whether it was pottery, cloth, or white salt, you compensated them directly per head. The Zhu tribe even received a solemn, large wooden barrel, said to be used for storing grape juice. You gifted them in return at the price of 10 girls. It's just unknown whether they would use the barrel to brew wine. After the trading concluded, the goods the Han tribe had brought were almost all sold out, and their numbers surged dramatically. A total of 343 young girls directly married into the Han tribe. On average, each young man had 1 or 2 women. This was mainly because the Han tribe was too wealthy, and many girls were willing to marry into it. Altogether, these people numbered 558, surpassing the original population of the entire Han tribe. Of course, it wasn't that there were no girls in other tribes unwilling to marry. It should be noted that the girls traded to the Han tribe were the ones ranked from the bottom up. The most elite and strongest boys of each tribe were kept by their own leaders. To put it bluntly, the weakest ones were the first to be sold to the Han tribe. Thus, some girls were also assigned to other tribes, marrying the boys they considered strong. The Bian tribe likely suffered the most this time. They had originally planned to recruit sons-in-law at the spring gathering, but because the Han tribe was massively purchasing men, they didn't manage to recruit a single son-in-law. They considered using hemp nets and cloth to exchange for men, but unfortunately, the other tribes didn't agree. Compared to hemp cloth, white salt was clearly more important. If they could still spare a few boys, they would naturally use them to exchange for salt. As a result, the Bian tribe ended up completely sidelined. Their leader, Chang, was helpless. Compared to the Han tribe's white salt, their hemp nets and cloth held no appeal. Chang helplessly asked Xiao Dai, "Dai, what are your thoughts? Do you want to join the Han tribe and marry their leader?" Xiao Dai dodged the question, saying, "Am so many girls married into the Han tribe today. Why didn't their leader pick even one for himself? Does he not like women? I feel like he doesn't like me either." In truth, quite a few girls had taken a liking to him today. The Han tribe was wealthy, and he wasn't bad-looking either. As the leader of a tribe of several hundred people, he was the top choice in many girls' hearts. Some bold girls even took a lock of their hair, wanting to tie it to his weapon, only to find that he, a leader of such stature, wasn't carrying any weapon at all. This left those girls dumbfounded, their hearts sinking with doubt. Was he really going to be this extreme? Could he be gay? Actually, your orientation is perfectly normal. It's just that very few women catch your eye. At that moment, while you were solemnly blessing someone, a girl from the Bear tribe approached you holding a strand of hair, startling you so much that your hands trembled. The tribal leader buying salt nearly lost his temper, demanding, "What the hell do you mean by this? Why did you deliberately spill some while blessing me?" Little did he know what kind of bizarre sight had caught your eye. The Bear tribe girl was burly and stout, resembling Ruhua, and she actually strode up to you, flexing her biceps. You were utterly overwhelmed and immediately felt like throwing a bowl of salt in her face. At this point, even you began to doubt yourself. Perhaps it was because you weren't of age yet and didn't want to find a woman so soon, or maybe you just hadn't met someone you liked. Xiao Dai asked timidly, "Would he like me?" Chang Songyong replied, "Why don't you give it a try?" Xiao Dai thought for a moment, as if making up her mind, and whispered, "Then I'll give it a try." Then, Xiao Dai braided a strand of her long hair into a thin plait, cut it off with a stone knife, and holding it in her hand, she walked toward you with her hands behind her back. You were sitting at your stall eating roasted meat when Xiao Dai suddenly appeared beside you. She took out her small braid and tied it directly around your wrist, even making a tight knot. You were completely baffled, turning to look at this young lady who seemed intent on making you her mountain stronghold man. You asked, "What's this for?" Xiao Dai said proudly, "This is my token to you." After speaking, she looked at you expectantly, waiting for your response. Unfortunately, neither of you understood what the other was saying. You gazed seriously at Xiao Dai. Compared to the monsters you had seen earlier, Xiao Dai seemed quite decent. By your standards, she'd score at least a 70. Of course, she was barefaced, unlike the beauties from your past life who couldn't even unlock their phones without makeup. After all, this was a primitive society, no need to be too picky. But acceptance aside, there was one thing you couldn't agree to. You shook your head and gestured to her that you wouldn't go back to her tribe with her. Unless she joined your tribe, you would consider it. Xiao Dai understood your meaning and immediately nodded eagerly, like a chick pecking at rice. She then returned to her tribe to report the situation to her mother, taking with her a pot of salt you had given her. Late into the night, the various tribes rested in their respective camps. After arriving, everyone had been busy trading, and by now they were exhausted. Only a few energetic young men and women, with nowhere to vent their energy, hid among the flowers and rolled around in the grass. Early the next morning, after breakfast, you took Xiaodai to browse the stalls of others. Since arriving, you had been focused on selling your own goods and hadn't yet seen what specialties the others had to offer. The snake tribe's stall was filled with snake skins and several types of medicinal herbs. According to the snake shaman, one of the herbs was specifically for treating external wounds, a plant root that looked like ginger already dried. It needed to be crushed or ground into powder for external application. You immediately recognized it as something valuable, a pure, natural remedy for wounds and bleeding, so you bought their entire stock. You also picked out a beautiful golden python skin and traded it for 3 pottery vessels. The butcher tribe's stall displayed wooden forks and animal tendons. You had little interest in the wooden forks, but the animal tendons were perfect for making composite bows. You traded 2 pottery vessels and 4 large bowls for all of them. The turtle tribe's stall featured a small turtle shell that looked quite exquisite. You bought it with a large pottery bowl. Next were the various other stalls in the dreamlike water valley. You, along with Taoqi and Bai Yan, went on a shopping spree. Some items were essential, like medicine, while others were more or less dispensable, such as animal hides and food supplies. Xiaodai held your hand and followed along by your side. The two of you spent lavishly and recklessly, nearly exhausting the peach fruits you had brought along. Of course, your goal was achieved. The tribes of the Hand Ridge were overjoyed to see you spending large amounts of Taoqi on their goods. Most tribes had exchanged their population for Bai Yan, but they also liked Taoqi very much. They simply couldn't spare any more people for trade. Seeing the Han tribe with so much Taoqi, many secretly envied them. Now that you had personally delivered Taoqi to them, even if it wasn't much, each tribe received a share, and the earlier tension greatly diminished. Their goodwill toward you, the capable young leader, increased significantly. With this, the purpose of the spring gathering was accomplished. Some tribes began to leave one after another, and it was time for the Han tribe to return as well. You had the team organized and prepared to head home. The Snake tribe and the Border tribe were on the same route, so they would follow along on the way back. 558 young men and women were temporarily organized into 20 squads, each led by a young member of the Han tribe. Zuer and Feather rode their mounts to clear the way at the front, while Stump drove the ox cart in the middle of the procession. Shu and Chang sat together on the ox cart. The Border tribe and the Snake tribe also followed in the middle. You, along with Dali and the others, rode your mounts at the rear, guarding the back. Xiaodai, seeing that you hadn't taken her along, stood directly in front of your mount, tugging at the reins. Seeing this, you leaned down and extended your hand to Xiaodai, asking, "What are you standing there for? Come up and go home with me." Hearing this, Xiaodai happily grabbed your hand and was pulled up in front of you. The two of you rode a single mount at the very back. A spring breeze carrying the fragrance of flowers brushed past, and Xiaodia's loose long hair swept across your face. Gazing at the smooth, exposed back beneath her belly band, even you, a man who had lived 2 lifetimes and considered himself unattractive, felt your thoughts wandering. To distract yourself, you began teaching Xiaodai to speak Mandarin. You named everything you saw along the way in Mandarin and had Xiaodai repeat and learn. By the time they camped for the night, Dali and the others came over carrying a pig's leg. Xiaodai gathered some grass nearby to feed the deer, while you had already lit a bonfire. Seeing Dali, you asked him, "How are things? Any movements from the people I asked you to keep an eye on?" Xianxia truthfully reported what he had observed. "Chief, among the 30 people from our tribe, 6 of them left marks along the way. This was exactly what you had expected. That fire chief really is no good. His tribe exchanged all their boys and still wants to play dirty behind our backs. But I won't let him have his way. Since he wants to play games, I'll teach him a proper lesson." Dali urgently asked, "Chief, what should we do now? Destroy those marks? Kill the young men from the fire tribe?" You smirked mischievously and said, "Why kill them? Why refuse free labor? If they don't want to live peacefully with us, then they can all dig rivers and move bricks for me." Shirtu asked another question. "What about the marks? Should we just leave them be? What if the fire tribe catches up?" You calmly explained, "If they left marks, it means they won't attack immediately. The marks are just to guide those following. They must first return to their tribe to gather more people and then follow the marks to catch up. According to their plan, they would attack from both inside and out, dealing us a fatal blow. For now, we'll leave the marks as they are. Let them stay." But we couldn't head directly back to the tribe. We needed to take a detour to Tugu Ridge. Dali seemed puzzled about why we had to go the long way. You didn't answer him. Instead, you turned and instructed Xianxia to relay your orders to Duer. As for Dali, he would be responsible for watching over the 30 boys from the fire tribe. Once we reached Tugu Ridge, they would be separated into their own group. Xianxia, along with the others, would continue for 2 more days. After 2 days, he would ride directly back to the tribe to seek reinforcements. You ordered Xianxia to lead the hunting team ahead to Tugu Ridge to set up camp. Once we arrived at Tugu Ridge, the 30 people from the tiger tribe would be immediately restrained. We would set up ambushes around the area, waiting for the fire tribe to deliver themselves to us. Then we would capture them all in one fell swoop. Dali still had doubts. Chief, how do you know the fire tribe will go to Tugu Ridge? Won't they just attack our tribe directly? Xianxia had already grasped your plan. He turned to Dali and explained, Are you stupid? Hasn't someone been leaving marks for them all along? If we lead the one leaving marks to Tugu Ridge, then those following the marks will surely follow to Tugu Ridge as well. Dali finally understood. So that's how it is. Your plan is brilliant. You continued to remind everyone to keep it secret. No one was to speak carelessly. They were to inform the squad leaders not to sleep too soundly at night. Each team was to arrange shifts for night watch. Everyone replied in unison that they understood. With that, you moved a stone and sat by the bonfire, continuing to roast meat with Xiao Dai. Early the next morning, the Han tribe's team set off again. They traveled safely for 2 days like this. The Snake tribe's team was about to part ways with the Han tribe. Shou brought his clansmen to bid you farewell. Chief Han, I'm leaving. I hope we meet again someday. You still couldn't understand what he was saying, but you roughly grasped his meaning. Quickly placing a hand over your chest, you bowed slightly to Shu. After the Snake tribe departed, Xianxia rode over to your side. You instructed him to return to the tribe first. Once there, he was to inform Dashu to organize the clansmen to build grass huts for the newcomers. Then, together with Xianxia, he was to lead the hunting team to Tugu Ridge to set up camp. They were to bring plenty of feather arrows and several jars of animal fat. Upon receiving the order, Xianxia immediately set off on his deer. At the same time, the fire tribe had also returned to their settlement. They were currently preparing to attack the Han tribe. The fire tribe was a large tribe with a total population of nearly 2,000. However, their demographic structure was severely skewed. There were only about 300 adult males, around 500 adult females, only 100 or 200 older children, and over 700 children under the age of 5. Moreover, there wasn't a single girl among them. This extreme phenomenon was caused by the current fire tribe chief. He was only 19 years old. 6 years ago, the fire tribe had fewer than 300 people. Back then, Li wasn't the chief yet. This guy had been obsessed with fire since childhood. His chest had once been burned by flames, leaving a large, gruesome scar. It happened in the summer when Li was 7. That day, his parents weren't at home. He started a fire inside the grass hut to play. This child was utterly fascinated by flames, especially the sight of flickering yellow flames and the crackling sound of wood burning in the fire. He found it exhilarating. But as the unfortunate child was lost in his enjoyment, sparks leaped from the fire and ignited the entire hut. The dry grass hut burned rapidly, and the flames roared fiercely. Li, as if possessed, stared intently at the fire, as though he could see a deity within the flames. The tribespeople who had stayed behind saw the fire and rushed over. Braving the raging flames, they grabbed the dazed Li and pulled him out. A large portion of the child's chest had been severely burned. Yet he stubbornly refused to cry out in pain, still staring blankly at the raging fire. Just after pulling Li out of the burning hut, before even having a chance to scold him, he heard heart-wrenching wails coming from the thatched cottage. It was Li's younger sister, not yet 3 years old. He wanted to rush back in to save the little girl, but how could a hut built of wood and thatch withstand the scorching flames? Before he could even lift his foot, there was a thunderous crash as the cottage collapsed into embers. When Li's parents returned that evening, they found their daily dwelling reduced to a pile of ashes. Their daughter, not yet 3 years old, had turned into a blackened lump of charcoal. Li's mother held that charred mass, weeping as if her heart would break. His father took a cane and beat Li half to death. From then on, Li Meitian was bullied by his peers, who accused him of burning his sister alive. His parents treated him with cold indifference, giving him barely any food. But Li remained unrepentant, still utterly obsessed with fire. Every time he was beaten by his companions, he would sneak away to continue burning things from afar, as if only flames could warm his heart. With insufficient food, Li began hunting to support himself. But being young, he couldn't catch many animals. Then one fortunate opportunity. He caught a large rat with long brown fur. The rat was slow to react, nearly blind, plump, and moved sluggishly. Li tied up the rat and threw it directly into the flames, burning it alive. The rat struggled frantically in the fire, emitting piercing shrieks, while he sat nearby watching with enjoyment, waiting for it to burn completely. But after waiting for a long time, the rat was still burning. Through repeated cruel experiments, Li finally discovered the reason. The rat's long fur was highly fire-resistant. A single rat could burn for a very long time. So Li named this type of rat fire rat. The discovery of fire rats drove Li to even greater madness. He even built a stone enclosure to breed fire rats, just so he could burn 2 every day, both to fill his stomach and for his own enjoyment. When Li grew up, he directly killed the previous chieftain and took his place. Those who disobeyed were systematically eliminated. Having suffered bullying and cold treatment since childhood, his temper had grown violent and his nature cruel. He began leading his tribe to attack others, killing all resisting men and children under 6, while taking the women back as breeding tools. During subsequent raids, he would force captured men to charge at the front lines. Those who refused would be threatened with harm to their women, or their older children would be burned alive as a warning. The captives gradually broke mentally, compelled to join the assault forces. After conquering tribe after tribe and undergoing blood-soaked baptism, and seeing so much plunder, the captives' hearts slowly grew twisted and willing to join Li's ranks. Those who remained stubbornly resistant were burned alive as human torches. Thus, under Li's leadership, the fire tribe expanded rapidly. Their warriors grew in number, and at one point, the captured women numbered over 1,000, all imprisoned in a dark, damp cave within the fire tribe's territory. The captured women were forced to bear children. Those who gave birth to boys were released from the cave, while those who bore girls were killed outright. Since girls born within the tribe couldn't produce children for their own people, raising them was considered a waste of food. Some women were captured at a very young age and couldn't withstand the brutal torment, dying directly. Others, due to the harsh conditions in the cave, ended up with both mother and child perishing during pregnancy. There were also women who had grown numb, continuously bearing children for the fire tribe. In the end, she died from illness due to weakness caused by consecutive childbirths. Moreover, this era lacked any medical technology, and it was common for people to die from postpartum hemorrhaging during difficult labor. As a result, the mortality rate among the captured women was extremely high. From a peak of over 1,000 people, only about 500 remained now. And of these 500, the majority were currently pregnant. The women were given no time to rest and recover, and in the end, they all died from various causes due to excessive childbirth. Some women who had already borne a child for the fire tribe attempted to escape, but those caught faced brutal consequences. Li Hui publicly burned a fleeing woman alive, terrifying the others into abandoning any thought of escape. They could only numbly become slaves, breeding children for the fire tribe. It was precisely because of this that the fire tribe developed such a distorted population structure. Over 700 boys under the age of 5 had been born in just the past few years. This didn't even include the hundreds of newborns who were killed immediately after birth. As soon as the Mud Spring Festival ended, Li still led 10 warriors back to the fire tribe. He intended to gather more warriors and prepare more supplies to attack the Han tribe. This spring festival had broadened his perspective. He and you were both fanatical about expanding the population, but your methods differed. You used white salt and pottery to make others willingly join the Han tribe, to force captives to become his warriors and compel women to bear children for them. Comparing the two approaches, his methods seemed to open a new door for you. So, this was another way to expand the population. Back in the fire tribe, someone questioned Li, especially since they were about to attack the Han tribe, which had a larger and more powerful force. Could they really win? Li responded with indifference. Although the Han tribe has a large population, most of those they brought back this time were women and children. These people have little to no combat ability. Besides, the Han tribe's leader is just a brat, isn't he? He planned to send about 200 people to set the Han tribe's settlement on fire first. Once the flames spread, they would charge in during the chaos, seizing the Han tribe's women, stone pots, white salt, and livestock. Someone expressed concern that the Han tribe's settlement was large, and they might not be able to set it all ablaze. Li Zhe assured them that he had already made arrangements, sending 30 people ahead. As soon as he gave the signal, those men would set fires throughout the tribe. When that happened, the Han tribe would naturally fall into chaos, leaving them helpless and at their mercy. Li also smugly recounted his trade with the Han tribe's leader during the Spring Festival, mocking the other party's reaction at the time, as if he viewed them as nothing but fools. His subordinates, seeing this, quickly began flattering him. Li then urged them to hurry and prepare supplies, especially emphasizing the need for more flammable rat pelts, as they were the most effective for arson. Li didn't forget to promise his subordinates that the women they captured this time were all young, and once seized, they could have their fun with them. Afterward, everyone in the Fire tribe busied themselves preparing for battle. They crafted weapons resembling stone axes, tying a stone to one end of a wooden stick and wrapping it in a long-haired rat pelt. In battle, they would light it on fire and hurl it at the enemy. This way, they could both injure the enemy and start fires simultaneously. Just then, 2 men carried a woman's corpse toward the mass burial ground. As they passed through the settlement, the pregnant women, with their swollen bellies, only stared numbly at the body, their faces devoid of expression, like soulless wooden figures. Meanwhile, the men crafting weapons chatted and laughed, completely unconcerned. But when the 2 men tossed the corpse into the mass burial ground, an unexpected incident suddenly occurred. Suddenly, a dark figure burst out from the grass on the ground. One of the men froze in shock, and immediately after, a whooshing sound came from behind their heads. Both men quickly turned to see what was happening, but as one of them just turned his head, he heard a buzzing sound by his ear. The next moment, a thick arm-sized club smashed straight into his skull. His head exploded instantly, splattering red and white matter all over the ground. The other man, terrified, turned and ran, screaming for help as he fled. But before he could get far, another buzzing sound echoed behind his ear, and the next moment, he too fell face first to the ground. The dark figure retracted a 2-meter-long, straight wooden club, which thudded as it was planted into the grass. Calmly, the figure severed both men's heads, skewered them on the large club, and slung it over its shoulder. Then, bending down, it hoisted the woman's corpse from the ground onto its shoulder and strode swiftly into the depths of the forest. Back at my tribe's settlement, several men were gathered together, making slingshots. One of them suddenly asked, "Did you guys hear something just now?" Another replied uncertainly, "I think so. It sounded like someone shouting murder." Then someone else noticed, "Why haven't those 2 who went to dump the body come back yet?" The group fell silent, exchanged glances, and decided to go check it out together. When the men cautiously arrived at the mass burial ground, all they found were 2 headless corpses. The woman's body they had just discarded had also vanished without a trace. Everyone was terrified. "Quick! Let's go back and inform the chief." After carrying the 2 headless bodies back and presenting them to Li, he furiously smashed the peachwood bowl in his hand. Gnashing his teeth, he snarled, "Damn it! It's that person again. When I catch him, I'll slice the flesh from his body and eat it right in front of him." On the 4th day after the spring gathering ended, Chief Chang of the Bian tribe came to bid farewell to the Han tribe. Since the Bian tribe's settlement was nearby, they could no longer travel together with the Han tribe's caravan. You stood to the side, holding the reins of your deer, quietly watching as Xiao Dai and Chang Bao said their goodbyes. Finally, Chang bowed to you with respect and led the Bian tribe away. Xiao Dai stood beside you, holding your hand, silently shedding tears as she watched the Bian tribe depart. You gently squeezed her hand and said, "When you miss him, I can take you back to the Bian tribe for a visit." Upon hearing this, Xiao Dai excitedly threw her arms around your neck and planted a kiss on your cheek. "You're so good to me." Afterward, the caravan continued its journey until evening, finally arriving at the foot of Tugu Ridge. Dali, riding his deer alongside Shuda, approached you at that moment. You nodded to both of them and said, "Start from the back." They nodded in acknowledgement and turned to leave. Xiao Dai, sitting in front of you on the deer, found the scene baffling and couldn't help but ask, "Who is that person with the silver nose ring? What are they going to do?" You didn't answer, simply leading Xiao Dai on the deer to Lei Shou's graveside, where you stopped and remained. Puzzled, Xiao Dai glanced back, and then she witnessed a shocking scene. Shuda, Dali, and the members of the hunting team walked past the rows of formations. They called the young men from the tiger tribe out of the ranks, confiscated their spears, and instructed them to help move the logs that had been cut by the roadside. The other youths in the caravan secretly rejoiced at not being chosen for the labor, unaware of what awaited those few dozen individuals. Grouped in teams, the young men carried the logs to a spot out of sight of the caravan. There, they were met by nearly 100 adult men and women. Armed with spears, bows, arrows, and ropes, they waited coldly. The fire tribe youths carrying logs immediately sensed something was wrong. They dropped the logs and tried to flee, but the hunting party, prepared by Xiaoyu, swiftly surrounded them. They were beaten with wooden spear shafts in a flurry of blows. The fire tribe youths attempted to resist, but their weapons had been confiscated, and they were already exhausted from carrying the heavy logs. Gasping for breath, they had little strength left to fight. After the beating, they were pinned to the ground and bound. In the chaos, a sturdy tiger tribe youth nearly managed to escape, but was struck in the face by Shu Dei's fist, knocking him to the ground. 3 of his teeth flew out, and with blood pouring from his mouth, he was pinned down and subjected to another round of kicks and punches before being tied up. Xiao Dai watched in shock, covering her mouth. After a moment of stunned silence, she turned to you in disbelief and asked, "Why are you capturing them?" You didn't answer. Instead, you tugged on the rope, urging Zhao Luo to turn around. Retracing the path the group had taken earlier, you pointed out markings on trees, by the roadside, or hidden in the grass, all of which shared one common feature. They pointed in the direction the Han tribe was heading. Xiao Dai's eyes widened in astonishment as she realized the purpose of these markings. They were trail markers. You explained to her. They intend to lead their tribe to kill our people, seize our women, and take our resources, even you. Xiao Dai was visibly shaken by your words. She had never experienced or even heard of such things. Another tribe coming to kill, plunder, and even abduct her. Fearfully, she asked, "What should we do? Should we flee to the Bian tribe? Mother will surely know what to do." You shook your head and told her, "There's no need for you to return to the tribe. I will deal with them here." Xiao Dai immediately shook her head firmly and declared, "I won't leave. Wherever you are, I will be. I want to stay with you." Her words moved you deeply. Though she was not like the women you had known in your past life, her loyalty was even more precious. Gazing into her resolute eyes, you felt a surge of emotion and couldn't help but view her in a new light. Reluctantly, you nodded, thinking it might be good for her to witness this, as long as she didn't get involved in the fighting. Just then, Uncle Shu approached, followed by 2 women. They unfolded an animal hide, revealing a pile of small black stones. "These are flint stones we found on them, for starting fires," he said. You picked one up and examined it. "Well done. Now bring all the captives to me. Light several fires, fetch a bucket of water and some white salt, and bring a piece of meat." "Understood. I'll prepare everything right away," he replied. You planned to interrogate the dozen or so youths. Meanwhile, the main force of the Han tribe did not stop at Tuka Ridge. They pressed on eastward, marching through the night toward their settlement. The young men and women in the group were utterly exhausted. They had been traveling for over 5 days and still hadn't reached the Han tribe. Now, they were being forced to march through the night, fueling their resentment. All they did day after day was walk. Frustrated, they asked their team leaders, "How much farther do we have to go?" The leaders reassured them, "We're almost there. Just half a day's journey at most. That's why the chief decided to march through the night." They also promised that the tribe had prepared food and that they could have a late-night meal upon arrival. To calm their nerves, the team leaders shared details about life in the Han tribe, how the tribe raised many animals, had an abundance of food, and fished daily from the river. Everyone could have their own mischievous white rock. There was simply too much to eat. They could take as much as they wanted. The young men and women, well-versed in classical language, burst into laughter. They were filled with anticipation for the Han tribe described by the leader. For a moment, their weariness seemed to lessen considerably. Back at the camp in Tugu Ridge, 30 young members of the fire tribe, with their hands tied behind their backs, were forced into a row, kneeling before you. Behind each of them stood a member of the hunting team, one hand pressing down on their shoulders, the other gripping their hair, forcibly controlling them. Seeing that Dali had already prepared what you needed, several bonfires were lit. Beside them stood a small wooden bucket filled with water mixed with a bowl of white salt. A few rough gold bars were also placed inside the bucket. Next to the fire, a bronze shovel used for digging was propped up. First, you had Xiao Dai step aside, Then you began gesturing to interrogate the row of frightened youths. There are 30 of you in total, and 6 of you left marks along the way. It must be 5 per team, right? Who among you is the leader? The group of youths, forced to look at you by their hair being pulled. Some didn't understand what you meant, while others understood but refused to speak. Their faces were turned toward you, but their eyes darted around, not daring to meet your gaze. I know who those 6 are, said Xianxia, standing to the side. Good. Pull those 6 out separately. Xianxia then walked over and pointed out several individuals in succession. The warriors guarding them pushed the 6 out of the line. The 6 identified youths, realizing they had been discovered, and that they had been watched all along, lost all hope in their hearts. They knelt there, dejected and crestfallen. They didn't know what you would do to them, but it was likely they would be put to death. You looked at these 6 individuals, one of whom was the guy who had tried to escape earlier and had been beaten up by Shuda. That guy knelt there, his mouth full of blood, his eyes fixed on the ground. You brought so many flint stones. Were you planning to start a fire? Tell me, what did your leader say to you? Speak and you'll live. Refuse and you'll die. Unexpectedly, no one spoke. It seemed none were willing to be the first to talk. After all, the fear the fire leader had instilled in them ran too deep. Betraying Lena meant only one fate: being burned alive. They had all witnessed Lena's executions multiple times. The agony of being tormented in the flames, the heart-wrenching pain. It was better to be killed outright by you than to suffer that. Seeing this, you didn't waste words. You immediately had Xianxia drag out the boy with the bruised and swollen face. 2 men held him firmly, and you brought the red-hot bronze shovel close to his chest. The scorching heat instantly made the boy's eyes widen in terror. Beads of sweat as large as beans seeped from his forehead. Speak, and I'll let you live. Refuse, and I'll roast you alive, and make sure you don't die. As you spoke, you waved the shovel in front of his chest. A few strands of his hair touched the shovel and immediately emitted a wisp of smoke with the smell of something burning. The boy struggled violently, desperately trying to back away from the glowing red object. But he was held firmly in place, his continuous struggles looking more like trembling to you. You glared at him fiercely and pressed the shovel closer to his chest. A sizzling sound like grilling squid rang out. Immediately after, the air filled with the aroma of roasted meat. The boy, his eyes tightly shut, broke down and screamed, I'll talk. Don't burn me. Please. You should have spoken earlier instead of forcing me to do this. You pulled the shovel back and cursed. The remaining 29 youths watched, stunned. Sweat broke out on each of their bodies, and as a cool evening breeze swept past, they all shivered violently. The warriors of the neighboring Han tribe were also stunned as they watched. After a moment of daze, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. You glanced at them, and they immediately tried hard to suppress their laughter, their bodies trembling with the effort. Soon after, the young man was released and instantly collapsed to the ground, drenched in sweat as if he had just crawled out of water. He lowered his head to check his chest. Huh? Why was he unharmed? Then he looked over at you sitting by the bonfire. You were holding a piece of pan-fried, golden-brown lean meat, sprinkling salt and chili powder on it as you said, What are you waiting for? Do you want to give it another try? You waved the freshly cooked meat teasingly at him. The young man stared at the piece of lean meat in your hand, his emotions a tangled mess. After a silent 2 seconds, he gestured with his hands and spoke. The chief told us to leave markers. When he leads the others at sunset, he'll send up smoke from afar. Once we see the smoke, we're to set the houses on fire. When you all start running in chaos, he'll lead the charge to attack. How many days' journey is it from your tribe to here? 2 sunsets to Meng Valley. To here? I don't know. The young man thought for a moment, seemingly unable to figure it out, as it wasn't a straight path. All right, take them away. Tie both their hands and hang them from a tree, but don't let their feet leave the ground. Give them a bowl of salt water daily, and feed them once every 3 days. Assign a few men to take turns guarding them. A few men acknowledged the order and dragged the young men toward the woods. You turned and headed off with the cooked meat to find Little Butterfly. It's time for dinner. Along the way, you analyzed the intelligence you just gathered. The Fire Tribe would need 2 days on foot to reach Meng Valley. Although they didn't know the exact direction to Meng Valley, the Fire Tribe didn't know the route either, so they couldn't take a straight path to Tua Valley Ridge. Thus, if they wanted to attack Tua Valley Ridge, They would first have to travel for 2 days back to gather their people and supplies, then spend another 2 days to reach Meng Valley. Only then could they follow the markers to Tuo Valley Ridge. And this process would take at least 5 days at the fastest. Adding it all up, they would need a minimum of 9 days to arrive. Now, it was already the 5th evening after the spring gathering. In other words, my tribe would launch their earliest attack on Tuo Valley Ridge at dusk 4 days from now. By then, they would send up smoke from afar, and as soon as the fires broke out here, they would charge in. Knowing the enemy's entire plan, only a fool could lose this battle. When they send up the smoke, you can light a fire yourself, then wait. Simply wait for them on the hillside. Having figured this out, you felt much more at ease. Happily, you carried the cooked meat to Little Butterfly. After everyone had finished dinner, Rat Big led you to the makeshift thatched hut they had prepared earlier. Watching you and Little Butterfly from behind, he snickered lewdly. "Chief, you know how to make babies, right? If you don't, I can teach you. I already have 5 kids myself. Get lost. I'm ordering you to stand guard all night tonight. No sleeping." Hearing that Rat Big dared to offer such advice, you cursed angrily. "Damn it! I've lived 2 lifetimes. You think I need your lessons?" "Yes, Chief. I'll make sure no one comes near here," Rat Big replied with feigned seriousness. "Your mother." Watching Rat Big scurry off with that lewd grin, you nearly picked up a rock to smash him. Turning around, you entered the hut. It was tidied up fairly well inside, with a pile of dry grass spread on the ground. Over the grass lay 2 short-haired mare hides. Little Butterfly was lying there, her face flushed, but with no fire or lamp in the hut. It was pitch dark, and you couldn't really see. You lay down right beside Little Butterfly. After some rustling sounds, Little Butterfly pulled your arm over, rested her head on it, and snuggled into your embrace. In the dark thatched hut, you held Little Butterfly in your arms, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling, lost in thought. Suddenly, you felt something was off. "Huh? Why aren't you wearing any clothes?" Mu said this way. "Being with you like this can help me bear your child." Xiao Dai stammered, her voice as faint as a mosquito's hum. One of her small hands rested on your chest, gently tracing circles. You were instantly stunned into silence. "My mother-in-law is surprisingly good to me." "Stop, stop, stop. Don't move just yet. I'm still a kid. For heaven's sake. Chief, don't you like me?" Hearing that you didn't want her to move, and that her hand was held firmly, Xiao Dai immediately felt wronged. With a sob in her voice, she whimpered. In the dark shack, you could feel the girl in your arms trembling, and warm tears trickled onto your arm. Quickly turning over, you held Xiao Dai tightly and comforted her. "It's not that I don't like you. It's just that we're both still a bit too young. I don't want you to have a child so early. It wouldn't be good for your health." But Xiao Dai still wore a somewhat confused expression. You had no choice but to give her a brief lesson on reproductive health, explaining how giving birth at too young an age could lead to difficult labor and other complications. About half an hour later, Xiao Dai finally stopped crying. Lifting her little face, she looked at you and asked, "Then when can I have your child?" "At least 3 more winters." "No, at most 2 more winters." "Fine, 2 winters it is." Xiao Dai humphed, lay on top of you, and fell silent. After a while, she began murmuring to herself, "Mu said I'll be the chief's spouse in the future. But I must do my best to help."